Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to the Union County Planning Board. March the 2nd, started promptly at 7 o'clock. A couple of things to talk about first. We've got, so I'm told, quite a number of people who wants to make comments after the applicant and our esteemed Mr. Hanson from the Planning Department make their comments. Then we will call on public comments. We're going to ask that the public comments be held to 3 minutes, not 3.5, not 3.5, no extra time, because we've got a pretty large agenda, and we don't know how many people, even though I've got the first sheet here, is going to come in and talk after whoever all is here, because we've got different rooms set up to hold the people that we expect based on the amount of people that attended the Zoom meetings, that wrote in, etc., to the Planning Department. We're going to do our best job up here to listen, make good, sound judgments based on what we hear. We're going to treat everybody here with respect. I'm going to ask each of you to treat this board with respect. We need to be civil in this discussion, and everybody will walk out of here happy, in my opinion. So with that, I'd like to go ahead, and our first item would be to have a moment of reflection, and I'm going to ask Jonathan Thomas to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd please stand. Bow your heads. Thank you, Jonathan.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Be seated. We do have a quorum. The dais here, so there's no problems with having to swear in alternate members. You have in front of you a copy of the agenda. It was also sent to you. And do we have any recommendations for additions, deletions, corrections, etc.? If we do, please raise your hand. If we don't, then we would ask for a motion to either approve as presented or approve with the changes if there's any change that come about. We have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. We have a second? Louis, thank you. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, thank you very much. I might make note that once we get down to and finish with item number 6, we'll probably take a short break at that time. We've done the agenda, we've done the approval of the minutes. Or no, do we have an approval for the minutes? Excuse me.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Patrick? Okay. Raise your right hand if all those in favor. Thank you very much. Okay, the first item tonight to be discussed is a zoning request, CZ 2020-007. Hope I pronounced this correct. Aventon rezoning. Bjorn Hanson. Bjorn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Here to present a rezoning request, CZ 2020-007, calling Aventon Apartments. This is the site plan for the proposed rezoning. This is a conditional rezoning, so there's a site plan that goes along with the requested change in use. This is an apartment complex that was initially a little more than 300 units. It's since been reduced down to 298. It's a approximately 20-acre parcel on the southwest corner of Newtown and Providence Road. And this apartment complex would have access from Newtown and Providence Roads. You see there's a 1.5 acre community park that would be part of the facility, maintained by them, but would be available to the public. And we'll get into more of the parameters of the background conditions on subsequent slides. But this is what would go to the county commission as a part of the site plan. They would be able to make minor revisions as part of the actual official site plan review process. Our site plan review process screens this to make sure that it's feasible to be built as proposed. So conditions, apartment complex, 298 units. There's right-of-way dedication both for Providence Road and for Newtown Road. Turn lane installation at access points on 16 and Newtown. There's a cross easement shown for that turnaround bulb that I'm going to go back to the previous one. If you look at the mini storage and where their access is located with the bulb, if that were to ever redevelop in the future, they wouldn't be able to get their own access for northbound traffic on Providence Road. So we worked with the applicant to identify the area near the bulb for a cross easement to allow them to access this turnaround in the future should they redevelop once the road is widened. That would also allow the apartment complex to have access for northbound traffic. So this is designed to accommodate the future NC-16 design. This development also addresses stormwater. We wouldn't require stormwater detention ponds. This does have facilities to accommodate up to a 100-year storm, which is higher than what we normally require, which is 2 and 25 for the appropriate affected developments. In terms of the development patterns in the immediate area, this is Newtown Road. Looking to the west and east, you can see that there's some of the construction cones from the continued intersection improvements related to the Publix. And across the street is an old single-family house. In the west, you can see a 2-lane road with little development along it. Along 16, you can see the signal for Publix that was recently installed. The site itself, which does have one single-family home that would be demolished as a part of this, it's currently rented out. South, you can see the large amount of open space along the frontage of the site, and kitty corner to the Publix. So the access point would not line up with the signal, mainly because their property doesn't go all the way to the signal. In terms of the municipalities that are in the immediate area, Marvin is across the street and Weddington is to the west and to the south, otherwise unincorporated areas. In terms of development status, this map includes data from a few years ago, so the area with the Publix would now be shown as gray, but you can see that to the west in particular, it's undeveloped. Environmental, there aren't any wetlands or streams or other significant environmental features. Obviously forested currently on much of the western part of the site, but otherwise no significant environmental constraints to the development of the site. In terms of utilities, that has been an issue of concern to quite a few developers in the area in the last few months because Union County has had to recalculate its capacity for available sewer, and because of the extremely wet weather over the last year, water actually infiltrates into the sewer pipes, and that is then treated in their plant, which essentially takes away capacity that could be used to permit new development. And based on the most recent data, they've had to revise downward how much available capacity they have. This is not a request at this time to build this site, so if this rezoning were approved, it would be permitted under the utility constraints or capacity at the time of submittal, which could be 3 months from now or it could be 2 or 3 years from now. So it would be evaluated at that time. But right now, we are aware of the constraint for sewer capacity to the site. But in terms of the feasibility to construct it, Public Works has reviewed it, and it is feasible to connect to their network. It does involve a lift station on site that would be privately maintained to access the sewer system, and all improvements would be at the developer's expense. In terms of zoning, we did notice recently that the zoning map that we used for this slideshow didn't include 2 rezonings that have been approved in the last few years, both of which are on Providence Road and were rezoned to commercial. So we will update that map for the county commission, but some of you were actually on the planning board for those cases. So there's actually commercial on all 4 corners of this intersection. Otherwise, you can see it's a lot of rural, or at least large lot residential or undeveloped. And that's a combination of zoning from Weddington, Marvin, and Union County. In terms of transportation, NC 16 widening to multi-lane in the late 2020s. It, even before it goes to construction, will involve several years worth of planning, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation before it even moves to construction. So we're just saying late 2020s. Traffic volumes on Providence Road are in the high teens to the low 20s. Newtown Road, 7,000 to 8,000 cars per day. The burgundy colors are for future cross sections. Newtown Road would be a 3-lane, which essentially means adding a turn lane. Providence Road is multi-lane with curb and gutter, and to the east of Providence Road would remain a 2-lane. In terms of the land use plan for the area, the overall recommendation is for single-family residential. As you move further south, it increases to mixed residential closer to Waxhaw, but this is the location of a commercial node, a neighborhood center, which would recommend a range of commercial uses. And based on this background information that was written up in your packet, there are positives and negatives to this application. First negative is there has been significant public and municipal opposition to these apartments. In your packet, both that was sent last week and the additional information that was submitted to you today, you have resolutions from Marvin and from Weddington, petitions from adjacent HOA and from area residents. We've received probably 3 dozen emails from residents opposing the application due to a combination of school and traffic impacts. Also just a general inconsistency of apartments to the surrounding neighborhood character. We recognize that 16 and Newtown Road intersection has high volumes. We checked with the NCDOT this morning regarding the status of that intersection because I drive it on my way to work and I've noticed that it's not better recently, even with those turn lane improvements due to the Publix. And the reason why is because there are still some of the loop sensors and timings related to it at the intersection that aren't finished. So the congestion that's there right now is not indicative of what's supposed to be there based on the improvements after the Publix project is complete. Also, the 16 widening is not scheduled for widening until later this decade. On a positive side, it is immediately adjacent to existing commercial area and a designated node. Apartments do have a lower peak hour impact than a comparable single-family neighborhood. Single family is approximately 10% in the peak hour. Apartments are approximately 7%, meaning that their impact when it's most congested is going to be less than a similar single-family neighborhood. The land use is consistent with the actual scale and character of the commercial node. We noted that this was a neighborhood center in the land use map, but the way it's actually behaving is more like a small commercial center, kind of like what's at Ray and Tom Short, which has approximately double the amount of commercial development and is a recommendation that includes integrating residential in with it. And that's what we base the recommendation off of. The existing and proposed commercial development at that intersection is in excess of 150,000 square feet. And there's still a couple parcels that are available to develop or redevelop. So it could be over 200,000 square feet by the time it's done. And that was what we based this recommendation on. We do wish that the road was widened in place, but we don't have that as an ability to deny developments. This was reviewed by the NCDOT and by the county, and it met both of our thresholds for mitigation. And the fact that it has access from 2 roads helps distribute that traffic. It increases housing options in the area, and the stormwater controls exceed the county standards. So based on that, we recommended approval. I didn't get into too much detail about the site plan itself or the TIA, traffic impact analysis recommendations, because the applicant is here to answer and present on that information. So before we turn it over to them, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions for Bjorn pertaining to this
I've got one
request?
question. You say apartments have lower peak hour impact than single-family development. We're looking at, what, 298? I don't have the information directly in front of me.
290.
298 versus, this is approximately 19 acres, currently zoned R40.
That's correct.
So my math being, if it's 6% of 289, or 298 versus 10% of 19, how are we saying that's a lower peak hour impact than what it's currently zoned for?
What we're looking at is the fact that we have projected, and you're going to see later in the agenda, for the 2050 comprehensive plan, and one of the underlying assumptions in our planning is not that growth will not occur in Union County. Growth will come to Union County. The question is, where should the growth go? And the question is, these human beings that are moving into these apartments, these families, will move somewhere. So if they were housed in this manner versus a different manner, what kind of impact would they have? So it's in a comparison to an equal number of homes, essentially.
How would you generate equal number of homes with anything other than apartments?
It would have to be developed elsewhere. The market would say additional subdivisions would occur elsewhere.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting at in this particular place, how would you end up with less traffic impact with apartments than pretty much anything else that would be zoned there?
Well, it wouldn't be about just this specific piece of land. It would be about all the traffic if people wanted to live in this part of the county and developed other pieces of land to essentially house those newcomers. As we wrote in the report, there aren't a lot of jobs and destinations in this area, so the traffic pattern is to Mecklenburg County, so many of them would still flow through this intersection. So that was the perspective.
All right, thank you.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but when you say that it's not adequate sewer capacity at this point in time, do you care to divulge what the actual report was?
I truly don't know the answer. That depends on how you ask the question to say how much is available, but less than what it was before they reran that analysis.
Because wasn't it reported to the county commissioners that they're less than 80,000 gallons per day in their capacity now?
Again, it depends on how you ask that question, because they have a lot of committed development. They have,
Right.
it's in the hundreds of thousands or even a million of available below their current capacity, but there's a lot that's in the metaphorical pipeline of permitted development.
I think the quote was made at the last commissioners meeting, if they fulfilled all their commitments at this point in time, they'd have less than 80,000 per day.
I think that's a good true statement.
Okay.
That's a good question, and to piggyback off of that, say this were to be approved and the capacity wasn't there, how, is there a time frame or that they would have to build, or would this be pretty much just rezoned in perpetuity?
Because it's a conditional site plan. If this were a straight rezoning to R4, that would run forever. But because this has conditions associated with it, it's typically 2 years unless you request vesting up to 5 years. And we haven't received any requests to go beyond that. So after a period of time, it would have to be reevaluated.
Would the zoning just go away, or would they continue to file extensions in perpetuity?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
But you say at this point in time, this expires in 2 years.
It would have to be reevaluated in 2 years.
Would it have to be brought before the planning board and the county commissioners again?
At that point, it would essentially be a site plan review based on the the development standards that are in place at that time to make sure that it's still complied with the standards that are in place. You don't lock it in forever.
So it is perpetuity then?
Well, based on the standards that are in place at that time, if we fundamentally changed our development regulations, they would have to comply with those new development regulations.
Louis?
Yeah, is any consideration being done, I see under your recommendations, where the widening is not scheduled for widening in NC 16, not scheduled for widening until later this decade. Has the county made any consideration in the revenue we get for fixing roads? Now, North Carolina is probably in the area, the highest taxed state as far as fuel tax goes to build the roads. When I first moved here in 1970, it was known as the Good Roads State. I think we lost that designation. But and also I noticed I was watching TV the other day, and GM is coming out with their first electric vehicle. Now, as you begin to get electric vehicles out here, the tax revenue from our overpriced gasoline is gonna be diminishing. Our roads are already bad, and I don't see them getting a heck of a lot better with less money to do it with. Has the county made any consideration with that, or is that just gonna be, if it happens, it happens?
Well, obviously, we're a county in North Carolina, meaning that we don't maintain any roads. And the DOT periodically revises its list of projects based on available revenues, because they have to stay constrained to it, and that's why NC 16 and some other projects in Union County are suffering because of it. And they, at the direction of the legislature, will study different revenue streams and maybe change their fee structure or their gas tax, which is still their major revenue stream. And they adjusted their fees quite a bit in the last few years, and also applied some registration fees for electric vehicles. But this is a ongoing process, so every few years they'll adjust based on that, and it'll probably evolve away from the gas tax over time as the technologies mature. But in terms of Union County and revenue, as you're likely aware, the 2050 plan, which you're going to receive a report on later today, has a recommendation for two things that it would apply to transportation. First off is to propose a 1/4% sales tax that would raise money that could be used by the county to assist the municipalities and the DOT in funding projects, but also to tie future developments such as this on roads that are proposed and funded for widening but not yet open, to link their approvals to those future roads being open to traffic. And that would apply in a situation like this. But because that plan is not yet adopted, we can't reference it. We can't use that as a justification to approve or deny a development. In 6 months, it could be a different story, but those are the two key recommendations that I think Union County Board of Commissioners have to consider in the next few months.
How come there's nothing in here on schools?
The school system does not provide student generation rates, but we did some research on schools in Union County for higher density developments, and what was presented at the community meetings was that the student generation rate is extremely low for apartment complexes, and we agreed with that the student generation rate is low for apartment complexes like this, and also that the school system has the right to essentially district the students from this from an approved development like this to another school cluster that has available capacity. So essentially, they would respond to this when it was actually a development that was opening to the public, and they had to deal with transporting the students that may live at this site.
Bjorn, I think everybody knows what we're in right now with the schools, with COVID, kids not getting to go to school, kids not really learning on this virtual schooling, et cetera, so forth and so on. And I've had some comments to me as chair that some of these families have put their kids through 3-4 school changes in a very short period of time. Now, do I have factual information I can hold up? No, I don't. but I've been told that. And a couple of these people I highly respect and know that they're up and up. So I was concerned about that. And I think the other thing, and this is an observation of mine because I do live down that way, as you know, but I will go into Charlotte, to the South Park area on some days for a 7:30 meeting, and people are trying to turn out of the Wheeling subdivision. They're on to Providence heading in towards Charlotte, and they're backed up. Unless some kind soul stops on Providence and lets them in, they sit there and sit there and sit there. And that traffic can be backed up almost all the way to the Atrium Medical Complex in Waxhaw. And it's no fun driving, because I drive it. I've got to go 10 miles on the other side, or about 10 miles on the other side of Waxhaw to where I live in rural Union County. And I'm very, very concerned that all we're going to do is compound this traffic thing more. And I understand the 2020 number, but every time it gets close to that, we kick it down the road. We kick it down the road. And there's got to, it's not complaining to you because you have no control over it, but at some point, some of this stuff has got to stop. And what Everett talked about on this water capacity, this is very serious. I was told that the water treatment plants, one of them is at 85% capacity and the other one was 80. Yeah, and that's pretty factual. And we're doing this on the come. Does that make sense? It's like,
Could you say that last statement?
here's a dice. It's like rolling the dice and hope you get snake eyes or something. So I don't know. I'm just voicing a concern and a opinion. And if any one of the board members disagrees with me, I would ask them to please correct me. Any other comments for Bjorn?
I have one. Just a clarification that the sewer capacity wasn't able to be committed to. I mean, it's feasible that they can hook up, I got that, and they're gonna do a lift station. But it wasn't, it couldn't commit to it because of all the rain that happened?
Well, they're never going to commit in the sense of allocating capacity just based off of rezoning. Their schedule is potentially a couple of years in the future, and Union County is just not going to lock things up until you've paid your money for your tap fees. But based on the most recent recalculation of available capacity, there isn't a lot left.
And it's first come, first served.
That's correct.
There is no commitment.
Till you pay a check.
Right.
Thank you.
One other thing, you were talking about electric cars, I thought that'd be interesting. There's legislation in Raleigh to where when you get your car inspected, your electric car, they will determine how many miles you have driven, and they will apply what the average miles per gallon is, and they will bill you along with your taxes. I'm sure you're aware of that, but they are coming out with legislation this year on electric cars.
Okay. Any other questions for Bjorn? Patrick, you have any?
I was still confused about the apartments with the lower peak hours and single-family homes. I still don't understand that.
Well, it's saying that,
If you have 298 apartments, you have roughly 600 vehicles coming out. I live in a development that's 90 homes, I have 180 vehicles coming out in the morning. Everybody's going to work.
what it's saying is that if 100 trips are generated by a single-family neighborhood versus an apartment complex, 10% are going to come out in the PM, or in or out, in the PM peak hour, which is normally your most significant peak. Only 7% is going to come out of the apartment complex. Their traffic is more distributed throughout the day. But yes, you're not.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Charlie, do you have any questions? Okay. Patrick is the applicant here. Bjorn?
He is, and I'll bring up his slideshow.
Do you have any other comments you want to make?
I'm going to get the answer from Lee regarding how we would administer the amendments after the 2-year period has expired and bring that back to you.
Okay. Okay, would ask the applicant to come forward, state your name and your address, and how you're affiliated with this request.
Sure. Good evening, Chairman and Planning Board members. My name is Ron Pereira. I'm with the Aventon Companies, 5420 Wade Park Boulevard in Raleigh. I'm presenting the Aventon Union County project this evening, and our team here with us tonight are Laura Reed, our transportation engineer with Kimley Horn and Associates, and Thomas Tapapuro with Design Resource Group, our land planner, and myself, Ron Pereira, with the Aventon Companies.
Good, thank you.
Sure. Who is Aventon? We are a Class A high-end luxury apartment developer and builder and asset manager. Our headquarters is in Raleigh. Our footprint is the Washington, D.C. to Florida and west to Atlanta. I won't go through all of these bullet points, but I've been a multifamily developer for over 20 years. Our principals have many decades of experience in this business, and we've built many, many projects all over the Southeast and in other parts of the country. Good, high-quality projects that fill the demand for quality rental housing. There's more information on our website, aventoncompanies.com. This is a location map. Again, this is an L-shaped assemblage with access on Newtown Road as well as Providence Road. The site wraps around an existing self-storage facility to the north and east, and currently there's vacant land to the west and south. This is a colored version of the site plan. Again, an L shape wrapping around existing self-storage with vacant land to the west and south. One entrance on Newtown Road and one entrance on Providence Road. There are 10 residential buildings proposed, numbered 1 through 10. These are mostly 3-story buildings with some split-level buildings where the topography dictates. At the center middle of the site, the building marked Club is the proposed clubhouse. So this is the management and leasing and maintenance offices, as well as amenity space for the residents, including a Wi-Fi cafe lounge area, 24/7 fitness center, yoga and spin rooms, a business center, day offices, and other amenities. Behind the club is the pool deck, and then in the bottom left corner of the site, you see BMP, which is the stormwater pond. To the right, along Providence Road, you see a plus or minus 1.5 acre community park, which I'll speak to a little bit more in detail. Building 1, just left of the park, initially was located on Providence Road, similar to Building 9 at Newtown Road. Based on a comment we received during the neighborhood meetings, we relocated that building, and now the entire frontage on Providence Road is the park and the entry drive. Also on the plan are lettered smaller buildings 8 through E, which represent freestanding garages. And also Providence Road is shown here in its widened condition after 2027, including right-of-way dedicated to DOT for the widening, including the turnaround bulb you see adjacent to the park. Okay, so this is a blow-up of the public access park, and as Bjorn mentioned, the idea here is that this would be a privately funded, privately maintained space, but it would be open and accessible to the public during daylight hours. The amenities we're showing here are a pickleball court, a covered pavilion, a dog park with a dog splash fountain, hammock lounge area, as well as an open lawn for picnics or frisbee or games. If you look on the bottom left corner, it's a little hard to see, but that's an aerial photo of the existing condition. You can see a cluster of 3 existing beautiful large-scale trees in the middle. We are proposing to preserve those and make them the centerpiece of the lawn area. So you see those on the plan, along with existing trees along the north property line to act as a barrier between the existing self-storage and the park area. So again, this is a privately funded and maintained space that would be open to the public. Why build luxury apartments here? The first bullet point, in my opinion, is probably the most important one. There's a very strong need for quality rental housing in the Charlotte MSA, in Union County, and throughout the Southeast. The project would diversify Union County's housing stock and meet that pent-up demand for quality rental housing. The project would provide workforce housing for the local community, workforce meaning nurses, healthcare workers, such as might work at the Atria or Novant Health facilities down Providence Road, teachers, police, firefighters, and other community workers that either choose not to buy a home or can't necessarily afford to the area median home value. The projected population growth over the next 5 years at the intersection, you can see double digits for the 3 and 5 mile radius. The 10-mile radius as well, close to double-digit growth projected over the next 5 years. Smart growth to plan for density along transportation corridors, such as Providence Road. NCDOT's widening project is funded and currently planned for a 2027 construction start. And of course, the demand for quality housing, rental housing, doesn't wait for NCDOT or anything else. It's there today. It's been there for a while, and it will be there for the foreseeable future. The project would provide rooftops to support the Publix across the street, as well as all the smaller stores in the Publix shopping center, which are currently vacant. The project would support existing small businesses that are there already at the intersection. The project as proposed would also provide a transition zone between the higher intensity use of office and retail at the intersection, transitioning to a future potential lower density residential use to the south and west, as shown on Union County's own long-range plan update, which you'll see, I believe, later this evening. The increase in tax revenue is significant and would benefit all county residents. The current assessed value of the property is less than $1.2 million. The potential assessed value with the apartment project is $60 million plus. And this is, of course, tax revenue that pays for infrastructure and schools and other things. Chairman and board members, additional items for you to consider. This project, if built, will create 5 to 6 permanent full-time jobs, and these are the management and maintenance staff at the property, as well as 1 to 2 temporary part-time positions. The temporary positions would be leasing during the initial lease-up of the property before stabilization. The project would clean up blighted houses and trash areas that are existing on the site today. Per the aerial photo that we saw, there are no single-family homes directly adjacent to the site. As I mentioned, we have reserved land for public use in the form of a community park. I didn't mention this on the site plan, but we are providing additional perimeter buffers above and beyond what are required in the R4 zone. The traffic study, which was vetted and approved by both Union County and NCDOT, shows minimal traffic impact to the surrounding areas. The traffic study, all of the data and the input and the calculations, all of it, what it really boils down to is additional wait times, incremental wait times. So how much longer is somebody going to have to wait to go through a traffic light or to make a turning movement based on the addition of these units? And the wait times are, additional wait times are very minimal, on the order of a few seconds per the approved traffic study. There's a question about schools. Our school impact is also expected to be minor, and I can speak to that a little more during the Q&A, but for a property this size, for Class A newer apartment communities, I would expect there to be somewhere around 25 to 30 school-age kids by the time the property is fully leased up and stabilized. A good portion of those would be school-age children that are already in the Union County school system via tenants we have that are split families or divorcees, but that are staying in the same school system. Our request is for less density, 15.6 dwelling units per acre than is allowed in the Union County R4 zoning, which is up to 21.78 units per acre. So a significant discount to the allowable density. This is an opportunity for the county to work with a proven developer with a great track record. And we will deliver a really nice Class A high-end project that the county can be proud of. The tenant profile in modern apartments is renters by choice. This is an important point, and I put it at the end so I could speak to it a little bit. Years and years and years ago, the general thinking was that people would rent apartments only until such time that they have enough savings or income to buy a house. So as soon as you have that, you just buy a house and forget about renting. Times are different now. Our tenants, by and large, have the income. They have the savings and the credit to purchase a house, but they choose not to for the lifestyle that these modern apartments afford. There's a flexibility at the end of a lease term to move anywhere in the country that you desire. It's a maintenance-free lifestyle where you don't have to worry about mowing a lawn or a hole in the roof or replacing an appliance. And there's also amenities that we provide for all the residents, community gatherings, the pool deck, 24/7 access to a fitness center, day offices, as well as many other amenities at the property. So I just want to make a clear distinction that the tenant profile in modern apartments is not like years ago. It's mostly renters by choice. Okay, I have a few photos to share. I'll go through these quickly in the interest of time. These are photos from one of our properties called Aventon Park West in Savannah, Georgia. It's a recent project, similar size to this one, about 295 units. The larger picture is the pool deck, heavy emphasis on landscaping, cabanas, South Beach style pool furniture, and a nice pool deck, all to give it an upscale resort style feel. The photo in the top left is the interior of the clubhouse. We hire professional interior designers to design all of our projects to give it a professionally decorated, modern and upscale feel. These are interior photos. The larger one is the interior of an apartment unit. So you can see stainless steel appliances, quartz countertops, modern lighting package, wood look floors in every unit, kitchen islands, full-size washer dryers in every unit. So these are well-appointed upscale units. The photo in the bottom left is the fitness center I mentioned. This is available to residents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with the electronic key fob access. Just a couple of more photos. The back porch overlooking the pool deck, as well as the main leasing area, again with the professional decorating. In terms of architectural style, what we have in mind for this project is a modern farmhouse, which is gaining in popularity recently in apartment projects and would pay homage to the history of the site as a farming area. So some of the elements are exposed wood and exposed decorative light bulbs, a mixture of more modern and more rustic furniture, all professionally designed and decorated to give it an upscale feel. These are some exterior photos, again showing the modern farmhouse style. So some of the elements are, again, the exposed wood, standing seam metal roofs, sharp gable roof points, And the photos on the bottom right are another farmhouse community. There's a silo type fixture and a barn. These type things are a little bit more than we would build here, but again, just examples of the modern farmhouse style architecture. Okay, so Chairman and Planning Board members, why should you support this project? This is the right project. Aventon Companies build strictly Class A luxury apartments. We do not build any tax credit housing, no Section 8 housing, no B-quality housing at all. We do strictly market rate, high-end apartments, professional on-site management, resort-style pool deck, which we saw in the photos, stainless steel appliances, quartz counters, and many other features that support a renter-by-choice lifestyle, which I mentioned. This is an opportunity to diversify Union County's housing options and, again, meet that acute demand for high-quality rental housing. Right location, support the incoming growth, which I mentioned, through smart planning for the future along transportation corridors, such as Providence Road. If this site were a mile or even half a mile off of a main transportation corridor, I would not be standing here, but this is the right location for a higher density compact development. Much needed quality housing in the proper location to serve the pent-up demand and the future needs. Residents will support the adjacent businesses while the project provides a transition buffer to lower density uses in the future. And finally, the right developer. Not all developers are created equal. We have decades of experience in this industry and a very good spotless reputation. We do what we say we're going to do, and we have a long proven track record of delivering top quality projects that are extremely well received wherever we build. Okay, so that ends the formal presentation. I hope I've conveyed all of the merits and the benefits of this project to Union County, as well as the idea that the project won't negatively impact anyone's quality of life. So we're happy to answer any and all questions you have. I don't know if it's either now or after the other speakers have a chance to speak. So thank you for your time, Chairman. Thank you very much, board members.
Any questions for the applicant from this board? Will you have any? Everett? Charlie? Robert?
Sir, correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying that you expect about 30 additional school children from this approximately 300 apartment complex?
Correct.
How did you figure that one out?
Okay. Great question. I'm glad you asked. Actually, you know what? Let me put my notes here. So the school question is an important one, as we all know. It's easy to quantify the impacts of traffic. We have a professional engineer do a traffic study. The schools, it's a little bit harder, so I'll have to speak from my experience and from my conversations, and I'll just tell you everything I know. So as I said, I've been doing this for about 20 years for a brand new modern apartment complex, about this size, roughly 300 units plus or minus. The amount of school children vary on the very low end from a very small handful, like call it 5 children, to on the upper end, somewhere around 20 or 25 or 30. And the number of school kids depends on the unit mix, which in turn depends a lot on the location. For example, a more urban location would have a higher concentration of 1 and 2 bedroom units, and very few 3s or maybe even none, whereas a more suburban location like this does have, it's still mostly 1 and 2 bedroom units, but we do have up to 36 3-bedroom units. in this application, so we'd be limited to that. And so, so based on my experience over the years, that's the range of school kids that we would expect to see here. And I would expect this project to be on the high end of that range because it's in a suburban location. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Apartments are, again, primarily 1 and 2 bedroom units, so they're not necessarily designed for families, whereas single-family homes, especially in this area, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find even a 3-bedroom house. They're probably, my guess is 4 and 5 bedroom homes. Per the American Housing Survey, there's not a whole lot of data on this, but there's an average of 51 school-age kids per 100 single-family homes, and that's across all home types. An average of about 31 school-age kids per 100 apartments, and that's for all classes of apartments, all ages. For newer, modern apartments, what we call Class A, the average is about 12 school-age kids per 100 apartments. And so that's about in line with the range I mentioned. The other thing to keep in mind is demographics. The Savannah property that I mentioned, about 295 units, there are less than 30 school-age kids at that property. And in speaking to folks on the management side in the management business, what they say is the demographics of the area also have a little bit of impact on how many school kids there are in a slightly, it's all relative because we only build Class A apartments, so the demographics are good everywhere we build, but for a slightly higher demographic area, you'd expect a lower number of school-age kids, whereas for a lower demographic area such as Savannah compared to Charlotte or Raleigh, you'd have a higher percentage of school-age kids there. The other thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned, is that we do, at these properties, we do have quite a number. We have all different types of renters, from millennials to seniors and everywhere in between, young families. We also have single parents, divorcees or separated families with kids that are already within the Union County School Group. So the Union County School District. So only a portion of that 25 or 30 would be coming from outside and would be new to the school district. Now, I do also want to say one more thing. We and all landlords are subject to fair housing laws. So in order to rent an apartment here, you have to qualify financially. Among other things, you have to demonstrate gross income of 3 times the rental rate, along with good rental history and good credit. And so if a family with school-age children wants to come and rent here, and they qualify, then we cannot exclude them. So we have to rent there. So we have to rent to them. So the 25 to 30 school-age kids is my best estimate based on the data I have and my professional experience, but it's not a guarantee that it won't be more or less than that. But I feel very confident in saying that it won't be a significantly higher number than that.
I'd like to ask you a question. You said Class A. What defines a Class A?
So Class A is just what we call in the industry high-end luxury apartments. So these types of properties would have higher-end finishes, such as the stainless steel appliances, solid surface countertops. They would provide the most amenities for the residents, such as the day offices that I mentioned, the clubhouse, free gourmet coffee to residents, 24/7, access to free Wi-Fi in the common area and the pool deck, social activities, organized social activities, as well as a 24/7 fitness center, all accessed with an electronic key fob, yoga and spin classes. And also the properties would simply look the nicest with the most landscaping and the most attention to architecture and interior design. And so, you know, when you spend the money on the finishes and the activities and the management, things like that, you also expect to get the highest rents in the market. So Class A versus, you know, Class B or C are the newer, nicer, higher rent properties.
Second question I've got, if I understood you correctly, these are going to be 1 and 2 bedrooms?
Mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms with up to 36 3-bedroom units, and no more than 36.
You will have some 3-bedroom?
Yes, up to 36.
Okay. What are the rental prices of these run, low to high?
So, you know, by the time if the project is built, by the time it opens, the market will determine rents, but as of right now, we're projecting the 1-bedroom units to be in the $1,200 to $1,400 per month range. The 2-bedroom units would be about $1,600 to $1,800 a month. The 3-bedroom units would rent for around $1,900 to $2,000 per month.
Okay. Demographics, what age and income are you targeting?
So, as I mentioned, in order to rent here, you have to qualify. A rule of thumb is you have to show 3 times gross income, 3 times the rent, either monthly or annual basis, good rental history, and good credit. So aside from those, we're not able to target anybody. So we have, at all these properties, we have a mix of millennials, we have retirees, we have young families, we have singles, we have roommates. They're all across the board. And that's the nice thing about these communities. They're diverse, and you know, everybody has their own reasons for renting. But most of these folks are renters by choice in Class A apartments today.
Appreciate you showing us Savannah property that you have there. What properties did you look at in and around this area to determine the need for these apartments? In other words, where's your competition at?
So there's not a whole lot in Union County. There's a project called Ardmore and Price in Waxhaw. They opened right around October 1st. They've been leasing for 5 months. Through the winter months, which is the slow leasing season for us, as of today, they have 95 leases. So they're averaging 19 leases a month, which is a gangbusters leasing rate for winter months. We usually pencil in about 2 leases a month for the winter months when things are slow. So that's something like 8 or 10 leases a month. Their leasing has been going very fast, and they bumped up their rents last Friday. So again, there's a lot of pent-up demand in the area. Over the last 9 or 10 years, there's been a record number of apartment projects built in every jurisdiction throughout the Southeast. In the Charlotte area, at any given time in the last 10 years, there's been about 10 to 12,000 apartment units in the pipeline, which is projects planned as well as under construction. All of those apartment projects have been leased up, and rents are still going up. And so between us, there are many other companies that do what we do. We can't build apartments fast enough to satisfy the demand. And we see that continuing for the foreseeable future. Again, people are choosing this as a lifestyle. And as interest rates maybe start to go up over the next few years, that impacts single-family housing more than it impacts us, which would add to the demand for rental housing. Several years ago, I think there was a lot of talk around the country about the baby boomers and where would they live after they age out of their houses, and there was a lot of talk about senior housing. So there's been a few senior housing projects built around the country, relatively few. A lot of these folks, after they decide to leave their houses, are choosing to rent in properties like this for the maintenance-free lifestyle and everything that's included with one rent check a month.
Okay, what about the mill? How do you see the
The
mill?
mill is competition also, but it's a fairly small project. It's not what we would call institutional size project. So smaller projects are usually built by smaller developers with, different, more local financing sources, whereas a project this size, we bring in a national pool of lenders and finance partners to put these together.
How do you think you'll compare to the real
Ardmore
estate
price?
that's going in over at 521?
So.
I know that's South Carolina.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm familiar with that property, but the one in Waxhaw, Ardmore Price, is what we would call probably a B-plus community. The finishes and the landscaping and everything there are at a little bit of a lower level than what we would provide, the amenities. So if you've toured that property, ours would be nicer in every respect. But their rents are very strong. They're in the neighborhood of what I just mentioned.
Did I understand you correctly that the access in and access out is on the Newtown side?
Yeah, so let me go back to the site plan. So we have one driveway on Newtown Road, and the way that our traffic study is written, this would be a full movement intersection if we are able to verify the stopping sight distance out in the field. If not, then this would be limited to a right-in, right-out. And there would be improvements along Newtown Road, such as a turn lane and stacking and all those things associated with the entrance. The entrance on Providence Road initially would be a full movement entrance. When the widening project is.
Where's it at?
It's
On
it's
Providence Road.
it's right here. This is the entrance on Providence Road.
Okay.
So initially, this would be a full movement entrance. When the widening project is done, there'd actually be a median down the middle of Providence Road. So this would be limited at that time to a right-in, right-out movement.
I missed that little island there. I'm sorry. It's my fault.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one question. You talked about the A, B, and C grade apartments. And of course, you got 1 and 2 bedroom, they range in price. But the reality of the matter is, a bigger apartment would cost more, a smaller would cost less. So for our edification, so we would know what we're dealing with in the future, what would you say the price range per square foot for an A-class apartment as opposed to a B-class and C-class would be? I could write that down, make a note of it, then I could maybe know what I'm dealing with in the future.
Sure. So for this property, for the rents that I mentioned,
Yeah.
the average would be about $1.50 per square foot. And that's the average over all of the units, yeah. And it varies, a Class A apartment here might be $1.50 a square foot. We built a project on the light rail line in South End in Charlotte, so that's a Class A property too, but because of the location, those rents are north of $2 a square foot. So, but they're both Class A, but it depends on the location as well.
Okay, and what would you say Class B would be?
Well, it varies. I mean, I would say probably today, with where rents are, it wouldn't be a whole lot less, maybe $1.35 or $1.40 a square foot. I certainly think the project in Waxhaw, Ardmore Price, is in that range, and the finishes are, what I would call a B or B plus property, but the rents are not that far behind.
Okay. So it's just pennies per square foot difference between A and B and C.
It varies on the age of the property, the management,
Yeah,
how.
I can understand. I own some property in the Elizabeth neighborhood in Charlotte. It's worth a lot more than I paid for it when I bought it in '85, I'll tell you that much.
That's a high rent. That's a high rent district.
We're talking about Union County. I don't sit on the board for Mecklenburg, I sit on it for Union.
Yeah.
So now I've got some basis on what you think is a difference between A and B. Although with that little bit of difference in rent, I don't see how you could attract a different kind of clientele for 15 cents a square foot. The average 1 bedroom is 700 feet, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, again, it varies by property. I mean, a B property may be, every property is different. It may be a $1.15 a square foot, that could still be a B property if it has nicer finishes and it's newer and it's in a nice location.
Thank you, appreciate that information.
Sure,
When you
So
talk
I
about,
got a question for you.
sure.
Did you say that the entrance on Providence is going to be there, once they widen it, it won't be there until then?
No, so the entrance on Providence Road, where's my cursor? So what it shows, what the plan shows is this will be built. Initially, when it's built, it will be a full movement intersection, so people will be able to turn left or right and turn left or right coming in. But when the Providence Road widening project is done, NCDOT is going to put a median down the middle of Providence Road, so there'll actually be a median here. So with a median here, nobody will be able to turn left out, or going north on Providence, they won't be able to turn left in. So when the median is there, when the road is widened, this will be limited to a right in and right out movement. And I assume the same would be for the Weddington Chase driveway as well, because there'll be a median here. And these bulbs, these turnout bulbs, what they represent are U-turn areas. So somebody coming north on Providence Road, if they wanted to come into our property, they wouldn't have to go all the way up.
I'm well aware of the bulbs.
Gotcha.
One might be going in my backyard.
Sorry.
Now, what about Newtown Road? Is that a right in, right out only?
So Newtown Road, it depends on the stopping site distance that we're able to verify in the field, and we'd have to do that with the detailed survey if the project is approved.
Have you driven this area in the heat of the time when people are there? Rush hour?
I've driven this area over the last several months, several times. There is existing traffic.
Oh, I know.
There's
I
traffic.
live right on,
there's-
my house backs up to Providence Road.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, there's,
I pack my breakfast when I go out in the morning because I'm going to sit there and wait.
yeah, understood.
You said the wait time is seconds.
Yeah,
I
so.
beg to differ, big time.
Well, what I meant by that is the incremental, the additional wait time that's caused at these intersections, close by intersections, by the building of this project. So, I mean, Laura can speak to this better than me, but the traffic study looks at the existing traffic and then says, okay, if these 298, actually the traffic study covers 310 units, we've lowered it to 298. So the traffic study says if 310 units are built here, what is the additional time that somebody would have to wait to go through a light or to turn left, over and above what's there now? And in all cases except one, it's 6 seconds or less.
Well, it's got to go up once they put that divider on Providence Road. Everybody's going to be going out Newtown Road exit because they can make a right and go out to the light and make a left at the light to go up Providence Road to go toward Charlotte. So it's going to be significantly more.
Well, I don't know if Laura could speak to that, or, it's, the widening of the road was not taken into account for the initial base case because it's in 2027. And so if the project is approved, it would probably take us a year to design it and another year to build it. So we're looking at 2023 before it's open, so there's a gap. And so it looks at the operations in that gap, and also down the road when the widening is done. And so the impacts, the additional wait times are based on the condition after the project is built, but before Providence Road is widened. And actually, I know it seems hard to believe, there's a lot of apartment units, why are the traffic impacts so minimal? And I think Bjorn was trying to speak to this a little bit, but the trip generation for apartments is fairly low. It's much lower than other commercial uses. We're kind of on the fence between a commercial and a residential use. Certainly our trip gen would be higher than 10 or 15 single-family houses, but on apples to apples basis, what you're doing with compact development like this is serving the demand to the tune of almost 300 households if you built 300 single-family homes, there would be more cars per housing unit, more trips per housing unit as well. So there's just a much higher trip generation for single-family homes on an apples-to-apples basis. And part of that is the size of the units. You know, a house is much larger than a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So that the low trip gen, I think, helps to explain why the traffic impacts are fairly minimal here. And it's consistent with what we see in other locations. If this project were in Charlotte, a traffic study wouldn't even be required because the trip gen is too low.
You keep mentioning apples to apples. Can you provide a scenario where you would have a true apples to apples comparison where you've got 298 single-family residential units on 19 acres? I understand the comparison, but it's truly not apples to apples.
Sure.
If it's single-family residential, would you not be talking considerably larger land mass?
Absolutely, and there would be costs associated with that as well as the, the cost for infrastructure to extend sewer lines that far, as well as the lower tax basis. Like, for example, on this 20 acres, I showed a tax value if the property is built of $60 million plus. So for argument's sake, if there were, let's say, 20 houses built here and the tax value of each of them were $700,000, so that's a tax value of $14 million. So 14 million versus 60 million. So there's a trade-off.
Sure. But, and I hear this from every presenter as far as tax revenues, and it sounds like I'm talking to a professional athlete. It's all about how much money we're making. The other side of that coin is how much money are we spending. And what I mean by that is schools are a major impact, so is the infrastructure. Look at the folks, Everett obviously bringing up the sewer capacity. That's a real issue here, and there's some significant costs and some significant decisions that have to be made along with that. The ratepayers are covering that, and it's per unit. So you're adding 298 units of capacity, regardless, and I understand the infrastructure fits just 19 acres, but we have treatment plants, and that's the big, that's the elephant in the room that he's alluding to. But you talk about other expenditures, you're projecting roughly 30 school kids. The cost per school kid is quite significant per year, and I still don't see any firm data from any kind of nationally accredited organization saying that that's exactly what we should expect. If you have divorcees, so for example, if I was a divorcee and I'm living out there in the Parkwood district, then I might want to rent something here, bring my kids to another school district that's more highly ranked. And I still haven't seen school data on this, but from what I understand, in this area, they're already at capacity or over capacity. So what's to say that someone given two options is not going to say, well, we're going to obviously put our kids at the higher ranked school and deal with that capacity. Even if they're Union County zoned, you're still creating additional demand on a school system because you'd have to either redistrict or build additional facilities on existing.
Sure. Can I speak to that, or?
Yeah. How do we guarantee? Again, we talk about $60,000 or $60 million valuation, the income, but how do you guarantee that we're not going to be spending more? I.e., the professional athlete analogy, where if you generate $10 million, but you're blowing $20 million, then you're going to be bankrupt soon, and that's what we as a board are. That's one of the factors that we look at as far as protecting the citizens of the county.
Sure. Oh, so, yeah, so, so let me tackle the school question first. So this site, as it's currently located, It's in the Sandy Ridge Elementary School district and the Marvin Ridge cluster for middle and high schools. Sandy Ridge is at about 84% capacity. The high school and middle school cluster, as well as all the other clusters in this part of the county, are at or slightly above capacity as of today. So I spoke to the school district. I wanted to get some information myself on, how the school district views this part of the county and, what they have in mind for the capacity issue. And I got some interesting information. I think you'll find it interesting. The county, or I should say the school district, hasn't done a all-encompassing study in about 4 years. They just completed one. And it's actually being presented at the school board meeting tonight. It was done by an outside demographer, and the study will help shape how the school district plans for the future, where they need to plan to build new schools or where they may close schools down. And so this was the first outside study that the school district had done in 4 years. And in talking about this part of the county, the information I got was counterintuitive. What they said is that even though all these schools are at capacity, the middle and high schools in this part of the county as of today, because of the home building that's been happening over the last several years, over the next 5 to 10 years, they actually expect the enrollment to decrease in this part of the county, which seemed counterintuitive to me, but the demographer would say once these new houses are built and neighborhoods are established, the kids go through the school system and then they grow up and age out of the school system. And the houses don't necessarily sell immediately afterwards to another family that would replace those kids in the school district. And so when you think about that, when I was a kid, my parents lived in the house that we grew up in for many, many years after we all aged out of the school system, and it was like that in the entire neighborhood. In the neighborhood next to us, there was an elementary school there that during my time that I lived there, that school was closed because the same thing had happened. All of the houses that were built there and fed that school for a number of decades, the school kids had aged out. And so the district is looking at growth in other parts of the county, maybe towards here, Monroe, and maybe wherever else, Indian Trail and Stallings and other parts of the county. But I think their demographic report is going to show a decrease in enrollment in this part of the county, the northwest part of the county, over the next few years. As Bjorn mentioned, the school district doesn't project the number of school kids. There are not many statistics on this, how many school kids will come out of this apartment complex, because it's private information. So somebody can't go and collect that data and publish a study.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
Who have you worked with at the county on fire protection and EMS protection? Can they get a fire engine? Can they get an ambulance in and out of this schematic here safely?
Yes, so the plan was vetted by the county staff and all departments. We received comments from them, and a few of the comments were about turning radii. So we've designed the site plan to meet all those requirements. We've also shown future stubs, road stubs here and here for future connections. And so we've addressed all of the county staff's comments from all the departments.
How can you have a sub going into all those what is that?
Storage unit.
Storage units?
Bjorn tells me that someday this may be redeveloped, and so we've been asked to put future stubs here and one here as well. And it may be redeveloped at some point. And then, as he mentioned, there's an access easement here as well to allow what's called cross-access, and that's fairly common today.
You ever been to Curitan in Waxhaw? You can barely get an ambulance and a fire truck down the street.
The shopping center?
No, it's not the shopping center.
Oh.
It's past the shopping center on the right-hand side.
Gotcha.
And that's one thing that I would ask the planning department to make sure that there's access in and access out for EMS equipment, if this is approved.
Absolutely,
Need assurance on that.
absolutely.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, we reserve the right to call you back up. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. At this time, we're going to go into public comments. I've asked Louis down here to take time. You'll get 3 minutes. What are you going to do in 3 minutes?
Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna time you for 3 minutes. When you, as soon as I have 1/2 minutes, I'm gonna raise the hand, make sure you see when you know you got a 1/2 minute. When you're down to 15 seconds, I'm gonna give you 2 hands. And then it'll be a little beep, and that's time for you to stop, okay?
We're going to ask your cooperation not to continue on, please, because we need to get through this. This has run a little bit longer than I anticipated tonight. So if you'll work with us on that, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. The first person I'd like to call up is Mr. Tom Becker. Mr. Becker. Welcome. State your name, address.
Hello, yeah, good evening, Planning Board, Don Fisher, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tom Becker, I'm a resident of Union County, a small business owner, and the proud president of Weddington Chase Homeowners Association. And what I'm here to do is really just to make sure to urge you in your recommendation to the commissioners to deny this request. I'd like to call out a couple things. The first one, in the staff report that was created, it was a very technical recommendation, right? I mean, they gave you a lot of very technical reasons, but they noted that the public had significant concerns over continued development in the area along with impacts of development. And I'd like to just talk about a survey that we did. We did 287 homes, and we had a very high rate of return. It was actually 99% rejection. So 99% opposed to this, which is pretty substantial. There were 3 reasons why they did that. One, and you're going to hear, I'm sure, a lot of this, is that the local infrastructure does not support the complex for really the upcoming decade. The study that was conducted during COVID, which really needs to be noted, will need to last for a decade, right? I think they noted 2027, but in my discussions with the planners, I think it was 2029 that North Carolina will begin the work, and we should just check that. The second one is that really Waxhaw, all the neighborhoods leading up to Newtown are choked off to 45. And we should just note that. I think that's really important to know the impact it'll have. And second is the impact on schools, to children. So, Chairman Fisher, we are that neighborhood. We were redistricted 3 times in the past 10 years, and we really stand to be redistricted for a 4th. So this will have significant impact. And also, when I look at the rating capacity, I just want to make sure it's noted. Marvin Ridge, and this is from Don Ogram, who I believe provided you with this information. Marvin Ridge is currently at 105 rated capacity. That's the high school. Marvin Ridge Middle is at 101. So, they're significantly over capacity, and I think that should be noted. And then 3, the project doesn't positively impact the Weddington Chase, as is stated, I believe, in the requirements of 2014 Union County Growth Plan. It doesn't benefit the area, and I think that is one of the requirements. And additionally to our survey, you're going to hear about the online petition, which was, I believe, over 2,200 people. I recently met over the weekend with 10 other homeowner associations, and we had a discussion. And they represented over 3,300 residents, and they were all in complete opposition. Additionally, and then lastly, this is in opposition to the 2050 plan, which hasn't been approved yet, but as you all know, the coordinating committees were completely against this. I think they made it very clear. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being on time. Appreciate that. Mr. Bill, is it Laughlin?
Yes, sir.
I'm 2 for 2 now on pronouncing it right, so keep going.
Well, we say Lachlan, actually. That's
Okay.
okay. I respond to just about anything. Good evening, Chairman Fisher, members of the Planning Board. My name is Bill Lachlan. I live at 1802 Summit View Place in Weddington Chase subdivision with Tom, and with the subdivision right across the street, across Providence. First off, I do want to thank you all for your service to our community. Your volunteer role in overseeing and controlling the growth in Union County can at times be a thankless job, and we would all be remiss if we did not recognize and appreciate you all for what you do, your energy and your public stewardship. So thank you. I would also like to give a shout out to Bjorn and Amy. They've been very responsive to all of our questions and very professional. Tonight, I submit to you this evening a petition of area residents who oppose this rezoning. The results have been verified to agree the best that I could and organized them by zip code. The petition was focused on an area, a 4-mile radius around Weddington Chase, and then organized it by zip code and just did the best I could with it. There were 2,200 people that signed it. I could only really verify about 1,600 of them. The petition, so it was 4-mile radius. The bulk of the responses were within, a mile or a half mile, the adjacent properties. In summary, we had 1,562 citizens, Union County residents, in opposition to the rezoning. 1,339 from the Marvin Waxhaw zip code, 38 from Weddington, and then 185 from other surrounding affected areas. As you know, the current zoning of the property would yield, right now, it would yield about 20 houses, the way it's currently zoned and kind of how our area is. This rezoning would increase the density to 310 or 298, whatever number that is, which is a 15-fold increase, 15 times. So that's a significant upzoning. That would be unprecedented for our area. If you approve this zoning, it's going to set the precedent, going forward. So it's just going to kind of open Pandora's box for us. And further, this kind of upzoning will further strain an already strained area. And Chairman, I appreciate you letting me in to the traffic flow each morning. So when I'm pulling out of there, so thank you for that. But kind of personally, on a personal note, my greatest concern for Weddington Chase is the impact this upzoning could have on our school-age children. Personally, my 3 children will be in college or on their own by the time this project is occupied, so it won't affect me directly. However, my family has experienced those 3 redistrictings in the last 10 or 12 years, and we would not wish that on anyone. It's extremely disruptive to the students, their well-being, their education. We started in the Marvin Ridge cluster, bounced over to Weddington. We're back in Marvin.
Thank you.
All great schools, but thank you. Please deny this petition.
Do you
Deny
have
this rezoning.
the petition?
I do, right here.
If you'd please give that to Mr. Hanson, please, or Amy, one of the two. Thank you very much. Okay, Carrie Greenwood. Thank you. Or no, just say Francis Koenig, I'm sorry.
Thank you for hearing me. I'm Frances Koenig. I live in Willow Creek, 1911 Grigg Lane in Union County. And my concern is not only about the traffic and the traffic study, but the fact that a semi-moving truck cannot even maneuver through that development. I designed roadways for Kimley Horn. I ran an auto turn program. I designed the roadway at South and Woodlawn. I designed the roadway for the widening on 74 in Wadesboro. And I can tell you, by just looking at that plan, especially with the median there on Providence Road, that there's no way a semi-moving truck can even facilitate that or make the movement through that roundabout. That's one of my major concerns. We'll have them parking out on the main road and then delivering in to that development. The traffic study is inadequate because most homeowners, the husband and wife both have to work because of the economy. So there's 2 cars per household, not 1. And because there's 3-bedroom units, there'll be high school age students driving. So some will have 3 cars per household, not 2. So the traffic study doesn't even reflect that. Also, it doesn't include a 10% growth for the area. Union County is growing at 10% and will grow even faster in the future. And that is not in this program. The other thing is that they have, at the public meeting, we were muted by the organizer and not able to speak. Even during the public part of it, where it was supposed to be open to anybody, my mic was muted, and I have a screenshot of that. And several other people I've talked to have said the same thing. So we really didn't get a true public meeting. Also, at the public meeting, all they talked about was a 310 unit. Never have they ever talked about a smaller unit. Also, for an R zone, an R4 zoning, it says that water and sewer has to be accessible to the site. Those houses, those lots are septic. Those are not sewer accessible. They have to be pumped out of there. Then you go to the zoning requirements that say that it has to have so many units. Those will be 50 feet tall. They are allowed to be 50 feet in height, and that is at the top of a hill, that whole unit. So my concern is that the traffic is not there. The traffic study is not good. Yes? Oh, I'm distracted, sorry. And I believe that the road construction won't even begin till 2027, and that is only going to be from Ray Road to Newtown. It won't even go past there till later. And there's supposed to be a meeting on Newtown Road also, right in, right out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Okay.
Oh, I got my notes. Oh, grab his. Sorry.
I hope I've got this right. Is it Rahit? And you got to help me with your last name. I do apologize, sir.
Evening, Planning Board. My name is Rohit Amnamanchi. I'm the planner for the Village of Marvin, and I'm here to deliver the official stance. It's 10,004 Newtown Road. So Tom said a lot of the things I was going to say, so I'll keep it brief. But the first thing I want to bring your attention to is that we did a survey in 2019. We gave one to every household in Marvin and got a healthy response rate. And that survey has been the guiding force for all of our policies in 2020 and going forward. I really think that's a matter of good governance. But in that survey, we saw that 98% of households were not in favor of apartments. I know that Union County has a much bigger picture to look at, but do consider that. The other thing from that survey is that 86% of residents said that traffic was one of their biggest concerns. That was the biggest concern by far in that question. And this Providence Road, as many of you know, is a 2-lane farm road that is acting as a major commuting thoroughfare. So even if this were the place, this is not the time. That leads me to my next set of points, which is that the infrastructure needs to catch up before something like this could even be considered, let alone approved. The roadway infrastructure needs to be improved, and the water and sewer has to catch up as well. We had a rezoning request at Bonds Grove Church, which we have postponed indefinitely, and Waxhaw has done something similar. I don't know the exact details of Waxhaw's, but I am here to respectfully consider that you do the same on behalf of the Village of Marvin. I request that you would deny this rezoning application.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
One question.
Yes.
This, that y'all put in the package, is that what he's talking about?
That was the,
Says petition opposing rezoning of Avaton Apartments,
I think that was
total of 1,562?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Kerry Greenwood.
Hi, I'm Kerry Greenwood. I actually live in Weddington, but I'm a realtor working in and around the area of Union County, Wesley Chapel, Waxhaw, Marvin. So just thank you for the opportunity to say something tonight. I just wanted to talk mostly about the quality of life. That's obviously what planning ultimately tries to accommodate and ensure that we provide for local residents. And in relation to that, some of the things that have been discussed this evening would lead me to believe that approving this apartment complex is not in the best interest of quality of life for existing residents or any new residents that move into that apartment block. So we currently, as a realtor, I know that there's a need for housing in the area. We have more people that are moving in every single month than we have accommodations for. But I would just like to pick up on the topic of renters by choice and to say that most of the renters I work with in this area are renters by necessity. And that's because we don't have the inventory of single-family homes that they would be looking for to raise their families or to move into the area with, not necessarily just children, but any age groups. So we have an issue of people moving into the area greater than we can grow, and that is evident by the sewer capacity issue that we have and the Yadkin project that is looking to alleviate some of those issues for Union County. In terms of the traffic congestion, the study that was done was growing data from 2017 at 2% growth rate year on year. And yet our current data of immigration into the county is anything between 7.9 and 12.6, depending on where you get that data from. So 2%, even if we just look at 1 year, we just have this influx of people. I drive the area regularly. The congestion between Ray Road and the intersection at Newtown and Providence is just becoming deteriorated by the month. We have more development down in Waxhaw with vacancy rates in apartments, the existing development of Millbridge that will continue till 2028. There's the new approval that went through for the 453 homes off of Cuthbertson. We have more traffic descending onto the area than we can quantify in the existing traffic study, and I really would urge if there was any way to reconsider the traffic study as outdated and obsolete and really not a true reflection of what is actually happening in that area. And then the development obviously needs to be supported by infrastructure, so everybody else has alluded to that. One comment that I just wanted to refer to that Bjorn brought up was about the Ray Road Tom Short area that's commercial. That area has 4 lanes wide on each side, not just a single lane carriageway. So all apartments come under fair housing, as we've talked about, and we know that people will rent those apartments just for school places, because you can rent an apartment for $1,500 and you can bring 4 or 5 children into the area to take those school places. The neighbourhoods that have, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Andrew Smith. Welcome. State your name, address, please.
Yeah. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Andrew Smith. I live at 8422 Royster Run in Waxhaw, North Carolina. I've been a resident of Union County for approximately 20 years now, and I just wanted to come up here and say I didn't want to get on top of what everybody else has already told you about, the deals with infrastructure and the schools and whatnot, but I do agree with that as well. But I just did want to tell you that, one of the things that drew me to Union County when I first moved to the Charlotte area was the rural nature of the area. The rolling hills, the farms, the agriculture, the livestock, all reminded me of my home of the great state of West Virginia. I knew that being outside Charlotte, eventually the growth would creep out that way, but I was hoping that it would be in a more of a controlled manner, that we would have the infrastructure, we would have the roads, we would have the transportation to handle that type of growth. And unfortunately, due to economic circumstances or what have you, we just haven't gotten there yet. I do agree that Mr. Pereira has presented a nice project, but I just don't think that this is the time and place for a project like this within the area that he is proposing to. Just to sum up, to leave you guys with something, what Mr. Becker noted too with our meeting of the HOA associations within that area, we reached out to the Union County Commission, and I wanted to leave you with a response that we got back from Chairman Helms, and he stated, I quote, "I cannot support this level of high density in that site. Providence as a 2-lane road cannot support the traffic and schools are stressed." End quote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, based on the way we worked tonight with some of the staff being out front on the sign up for public comments, this is all I've got. There hadn't been anything else come through, so we're going to close the comments to the public right now. But does the applicant have any final word you want to say? Any final word? Going once, going twice?
Yes, so we have,
Please, sir.
Chairman, appreciate the opportunity. There's been a lot of discussion about traffic, so we have some additional slides. So we'd just like to spend a few minutes presenting those and just run through the findings in the traffic study. And I think that would help everybody to understand a little bit the conclusions of the study, if that's okay.
So you want this lady to present some traffic information?
Correct, from the traffic study.
Time out. I need to get ruling on this. This should have been done prior to public comment, should it not have? Am I right or am I wrong, Bjorn? I'm not trying to be hard-nosed.
The order was, we present, then the developer presents, or the applicant presents whatever they choose to present, and then the public speaks. So typically, we have some additional information that's available to answer questions.
Are you saying it's
your
okay
call.
to take these comments or not?
If you think it'll help make your decision, then that's fine.
I think normally this information would be presented during a presentation, but it's really in the board's discretion as to whether you would like to hear this information now.
Okay. You say no? Patrick? No?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. That part of the hearing is now closed. We'd like to have the planning staff give any final comments before you have none? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any discussion about this? Any discussion?
Mr.
Heard
Chairman.
enough? What's the thoughts? Yes, sir.
I have a question for somebody who knows how to answer it. Can we get a long bed tandem straight truck through this arrangement?
We can say that this was reviewed by the fire marshal, and this will accommodate any of our fire equipment. When we actually go to if this is approved and we actually get a site plan review, we're going to expend a lot more effort on the level of review necessary to actually build it. When we do a rezoning, it's barely a sketch plan in terms of the level of detail. It will get reviewed to meet all of our specifications at the time with the appropriate amount of detail. We get so many rezonings, it's just not at the level of detail to give that type of response, but it's going to meet all of our zoning requirements. And to follow up on an earlier question where I said I needed to do a little bit of research regarding the conditional rezoning, what would happen is we would review it at the time of submittal according to the zoning standards and or the development regulations, and after 2 years, we can go back and the county commission can essentially review it, and if it hasn't been acted upon, and can choose to reapprove the rezoning or to actually revert the zoning back so that you don't hold it in perpetuity. But that's at their discretion. There's no mandated requirement to go and re-review the rezoning that was made for the parcel.
So what happens if they don't bring it back up?
Then this would run until they do something with it.
Okay. Is that clarified?
No, it doesn't answer my question at all. I want to know if you can get a tandem straight truck through these roads. This lady says you can.
I did the traffic course, Kimley Horn, and I ran auto turn, and it cannot maneuver through that development. A semi cannot go through there.
I'm not talking about a semi, ma'am. I'm talking about a tandem straight truck. You know the difference if you worked in that industry.
That's right. You see
Well-
that roundabout with all the parking spots around it? You see the sizes of the radiuses going in and out? You see how the one place around Building 10, where it switches back and then has a short section and then tries to turn again? I even talked to a fireman, and he told me there are sections of that road that he wouldn't even attempt to go down.
Charlie, I think you've got a good question, because so many people are storing their furniture, and it's brought out on what you're talking about.
This
in the
is
crane.
this is a multi-story structure.
Yeah.
In order to fight a fire there, they're going to have the biggest fire truck they got in this county. And that's a tandem, a long bed tandem truck. If this thing is drawn to scale, I don't see how in the world you can get that vehicle down through there, even if you try and make 5-point turns. And so I have a concern about that.
Duly noted.
I can put 2 cents in here. I happen to own a tractor trailer that does over the road stuff. We have a 48-foot flatbed trailer as well as a 53-foot box trailer. And if those to scale, if those parking spaces are to scale for a regular parking thing, there's no way I could get my truck in there without tearing those houses.
I wouldn't think a semi-truck could go in there at all, Louis, I understand that. I was just curious about a straight truck. I was curious about a straight truck.
Okay. Thank you, Bjorn. Okay. Any more board discussion? Comments or anything?
Number one, you know, I would say that I appreciate it being a Class A project. And I'm proud that it is, and obviously they have great venues already. I am troubled, number one, by the fact that it's 2 years away, and the county's the commissioners are gonna have a real difficult time approving this, even if we pass it, because they subject themselves to the liability of no sewer. And we're looking at least 3 years down the road before there is going to be any available sewer. And that troubles me a great deal. Matter of fact, I even question why we are entertaining these things if the capacity's gone already.
Okay, appreciate that. Everett, thank you very much. Any other comments? If not, then we need to discuss a motion to approve or disapprove. Do we have a motion from the board up here? Does anyone have a motion?
Motion to disapprove, citing sewer, traffic, schooling, opposition. It's a nice project. This is not the time or the place.
I need a clarification. We had a quorum here. The alternates have not been sworn in. That has to come from up here, doesn't it? Or can
Right,
it?
I think you got a six.
Pardon?
I think you have a 6-member board right now.
Okay, all right. So we can take that motion?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I didn't want to be
I'm
doing
a
anything
regular
out of
member.
line. Okay, all right. I
I'm just in the bad
apologize. I
seats.
apologize. Okay, restate that again, please.
Citing the sewer, the traffic, the schools, and the overall opposition. It's the wrong time, it's the wrong place, and I make the motion on those grounds to disapprove.
Okay. When we ask for a motion, either way, we did not have a motion to approve. So am I correct in understanding that there's no motion out there for that? Okay, there is not. So those in favor of denial. Oh, excuse me, we need a second to accept his motion. Patrick, okay? With that second, then, we'd call for a motion. All those in favor of denial, please raise your right hand. Okay, thank you very much. Bjorn, Lee, do you want to explain what the next step is for this applicant? And then we're going to take a break.
I'm so used to it.
I
Sure. So the next steps for the benefit of the public as well as the applicant is that this would go to the county commission for the first meeting in April. This would be advertised in the paper, and the public within a certain radius of the site would be notified by mail. And there'd be a public hearing at the meeting where the commissioners hear public input. They aren't scheduled to take action at that meeting, but they could choose to do so. If they don't, then action would be taken at the next meeting in April.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I want to thank all those that attended tonight. We'll take a 5-minute break, but we appreciate the kindness that you've shown this board. Have a safe drive home. Thank you.
voted with you, okay? I apologize.
Let's go ahead and get restarted here. Lee, you're up. Next item will be item number 7, tax amendment, UDO. Section 5.030 and 105.030, maximum density. Lee?
Yes, sir. Just waiting on. Yeah.
Hope we got a budget for additional hard drives.
I didn't have it in all the way. Okay, so this is a proposed text amendment regarding maximum site density on a piece of property. And really, it's kind of broken down into 3 different parts. We have a definition of what maximum site density means, and then we have some standards that have been modified under both the conventional subdivision standards and cluster subdivision standards to actually apply this term to certain situations. This is the definition as it's been proposed in the text. So it's the total number of dwelling units allowed on a lot expressed as the number of dwelling units per acre. And the number is achieved by dividing the total square footage of the tract to be developed minus any exclusions required by the ordinance by the minimum square footage for a lot in the corresponding zoning district. That's your basic definition of density. And I'll oversimplify it probably, but and we said it 100 times. In R40, just to take it on its face, it kind of means that you have about, if you have a 100-acre lot, it kind of means you have about 100 lots. That's not exact. You would have to actually kind of go through and 43,560, and you would have to do that math to arrive at the actual number, but that's about what it means. In RA40, you get about 1 unit per acre. The major difference that the way it's applied is really under these 2 different sections I'm about to show you here. So under conventional development, there's actually 3 changes here. One was to provide a better definition of what conventional development is. That really wasn't part of the overall scope of what we were looking at, but honestly, when we started looking at the conventional development definition, there's not one. It just says anything other than a cluster development, which to us makes a lot of sense, but I think to the public and some other folks who may be looking at the ordinance, that may not make a whole lot of sense to them. So, and then when you looked over at the definition of cluster development, it has a really broad definition, but then there's a couple parts where it says it refers you back to the definition of conventional development. So then you kind of get in this circular sort of pattern. It refers you to 2 different places. So we came up with a very simple but a better definition of what conventional development is. And then we specified, again, this is one of those things that was clear to staff, I think, but to folks who are maybe users of the ordinance, maybe it wasn't so clear, specifies that conventional development is applicable to all R and RA zone properties and is subject to the lot and building regulations of the UDO. The third was really, and like I said, the first 2 were kind of things that we really didn't intend to change, but when we started analyzing the ordinance, we thought that those might be 2 things to put in there to clarify a couple of items. The third is really meat and potatoes of what we were looking at as far as this rezoning goes, or I'm sorry, the text amendment. And it specifies that 3 things, existing and proposed street right-of-way, floodplain areas, and stream buffers cannot be counted toward overall density when designing a major subdivision. So that's That's any subdivision more than 8 lots, or that requires, new streets to be built, new public streets, or things like that. So this proposed amendment would not apply to minors, which are mainly 1 or 2 lots. It doesn't have to be this, but probably 95% of our minor subdivisions are a parent giving a lot to a child, or a grandparent giving a lot to a grandchild, or something like that. Yes, sir.
Quick question, major subdivisions, that definition clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's already in the ordinance. Thank you, that's a good question. But this would basically exclude areas that are in floodplains, stream buffers, and existing and proposed street right-of-way from that maximum density calculation. So when you go back to that definition, that area in parentheses down there on the 3rd line, minus any exclusions required by this ordinance, that's where that comes into play. The biggest one of those is going to be floodplain areas. That's going to be the biggest impact, I think, as part of this text amendment. Stream buffers aren't very big. Usually you could have a 200-foot stream buffer if it's in a certain watershed, like Waxhaw Creek, for example. 90% of the time, those stream buffers are actually contained within the floodplain, so the floodplain area is actually bigger than the stream buffer. So you're not going to double count it, you're just not going to be able to count the floodplain area. But usually, in most cases, the floodplain area doesn't take up a large portion of the property. It's usually a relatively small portion. I will say there are exceptions. There are properties in Union County that are inundated with floodplain, but those are the exception rather than the norm. And then under cluster development, a couple of those, the first 2 on here, there was a good definition of cluster development already in the ordinance, and it already specified in the cluster development section of the districts that applied to. It did not apply to all R and RA zone properties. Cluster was just, I think, the R40s, the RA and R40s, and the RA and R20s is what that applied to. So we just had to add that one bullet point to exclude those areas from that calculation. That's the extent of my PowerPoint. If you want to actually see the amendments, we can pull those up. Oh, good gracious, I didn't realize that. Here we go. So these are what we generally refer to as strike-throughs and underlines. So you can see where part of this has been stricken. This was just picked up a little, this red part was picked up down here. It just made sense to move it to a different part. But all the green is new. So this is the definition. So it's any development that utilizes Table 5-2 to establish minimum lot sizes. That's what a conventional development is. You're not varying the lot size. You're locked into, if it's R40 and you're doing single-family residential lots, it's 40,000 square feet. That's what a conventional development is. And applicability, you can see, that's what I went over before, R and RA, lot and building regulations, and then the density standards. So this is where you get into the A, B, and where you can't transfer it across roads, and you can't count existing and proposed street right-of-way, and then special flood hazard areas and riparian buffers can't be used to calculate maximum density. So that's the conventional. There's the change to the cluster section. And then this is the addition of maximum site density to the ordinance.
This is the cluster section.
What you're looking at right now is the definition of maximum site density. The cluster is a few screens up right here. So it was just that one sentence to provide the exclusion. And I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Obviously, y'all have had some difficulty with this before. People using right-of-ways and that sort of thing is a maximum density.
Yes. really it's, the right-of-ways don't usually constitute a whole lot of area in a subdivision. And if it's an existing right-of-way, you can't develop that anyway. It's not a developable piece of the property. So that's why it's being proposed to be excluded. And it's really the same with a floodplain. Our ordinance does not allow it allows limited development in a floodplain. You can't use it you can't build houses in it. You can't build accessory buildings in it. You can, you can walk around on it. You can plant a garden on it if you want. You can, if it's in a common area of a homeowners association, you could build a trail. You could build water and sewer lines in it, provided you meet certain standards. But generally, for development purposes, so if you've got a raw R40 tract of land, you can't, and you're doing a conventional subdivision, you can't build on it anyway. So when you're talking about maximum density, it doesn't really, you can't use that floodplain area for anything anyway. It really just becomes a portion of a lot. So if a developer goes in and they want to build an R40 subdivision and you got a big floodplain, typically what you end up with is these just 1 acre lots on one side of the street, and the other side of the street you may have 5 acre lots. You've got 1 acre that's developable, and the rest of it is not developable. And that's fine, and that would meet this standard. There would be absolutely nothing wrong with that. Where you really get into on conventional developments, this really doesn't impact them so much. Where you get into the impact is on cluster subdivisions, because then you can start clustering down in R40 and cluster down to 20,000 square foot lots, and that's where your impact is going to be.
Count
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I completely understand that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lee, ever since I've been on this board, it's concerned me on these developments. We're telling these guys evidently a minimum street width. And it's just like these fire trucks here again. In my lifetime, I've seen these fire trucks go from a simple little 2-ton truck with about 14-foot area for all the equipment and everything on it to these gargantuan things that seem to be more the norm than not nowadays. Even in the local volunteer fire departments, the newest vehicle, the one that they want to take on every single call, is the one that's got all this equipment for cutting people out of places, and it's got the right pumping equipment, it's got all the little valves and everything to hook up to everybody's fire hydrants in all different ways and configurations. And so that's the principal vehicle they want to take, and it's one of the larger vehicles there. And I'm concerned, having driven large trucks, with our ability to get it down through these areas with people parking on the street, and we've got more people want to front load these developments and everything. Are we staying up with the street widths? I mean, because I don't want these developers to come in here and spend all this time and effort and money and then get shot down because of what I just asked somebody.
Sure. So as far as the design of streets goes, we really, I want to say utilize two sources, but really it's primarily one. Since Union County and counties in North Carolina in general don't own or maintain any roads. They haven't really since the Great Depression. All roads in unincorporated areas of counties in North Carolina are owned and maintained by NCDOT. And NCDOT establishes the minimum standards for what those roads are going to be. So they have, depending on the type of road, they say it has to be a minimum right-of-way and a minimum lane width, so minimum pavement width. And that's primarily what Union County goes by. All the plans that come into our office are sent to NCDOT for review and comment and ultimately approval. I said there's a second source, and it's not a primary source, but they also do look at these developments as the fire marshal's office. And every once in a while, they will have a comment on public streets, but they also look at private developments. So they'll look at things like apartment complexes. They'll look at commercial developments, and they'll look at private roads. Even though our private road standards, it doesn't matter. It still has to be designed to NCDOT. Occasionally, the fire marshal will make some comments about stub streets. You've seen those plans where those streets are stubbed out. If they're, and he likes those, but if they're over a certain length, he wants to have a turnaround, a temporary turnaround for a fire truck, and we always accommodate that on our plan review. You know, the on-street parking, that is tough, to be honest with you, because it's hard to regulate. DOT doesn't like it.
You can't regulate it.
Right, DOT technically, I don't think allows it, but they don't have people that drive around and, ticket people for parking on the street.
You know, it's one of those,
Yeah.
one of those.
So they don't have to build to DOT standards then?
Yes.
Parking lots and whatnot in these apartment complexes?
Apartment complexes. If they include a street in the apartment complex, that has to be designed to NCDOT standard. I guess I was speaking more to commercial type developments that have a big parking lot, and they may have an access road that goes around the backside of the commercial building.
It's just all parking lots all around the building, it's just
Yeah, so
thoroughfares.
So a lot of those parking lots, there is no DOT standard for a parking lot. But there are fire code requirements. So any kind of commercial development that's submitted, it has to go through the fire marshal's office. And I've talked to our fire marshal in Union County about what his review entails. He'll look at the plan for compliance with minimum fire code standards, that's what we can hold them to. If they meet minimum fire code standards, then he sits down and talks to the fire chief for whatever district that's in. And he'll take their comments and kind of pass them on to the developer. Now, a lot of them, you can't hold them to, you can't say, you have to do this, but we usually get, we can't, not if it's a minimum. If you have a code that says you have to do 1, 2, and 3, and you're doing 1, 2, and 3, you can't make up rules and say, well, I don't like what 3 says, so I want you to do this. We don't have the ability to do that.
You've overstepped your.
Right,
authority.
we would be overstepping our authority at that point.
Would it be overstepping your
Now-
authority to make comments about that in staff recommendations?
And that's what, when the fire marshal, Kevin Regali, when he sits down with those fire chiefs, he does talk through issues. And during site plan review, if he sees something that he thinks is going to be an issue, and the fire chief says, yeah, I think that's an issue, then they can make those recommendations to the developer. And we get pretty good compliance with those, because they understand that, you want to make the fire marshal happy if you can. You want to make that fire chief happy. And
Well, I just don't want to go through an effort and futility, that's all.
Sure. And we also send out rezonings to the fire marshal's office. Now, granted, a lot of times a rezoning, a concept plan that you get for a rezoning, they're not engineered site plans. I mean, they're not engineered. They are conceptual level plans that he can look at and he can make some general comments on. You have to have an engineered full set of detailed design drawings in order for him to really give a 100% review, which a developer's not going to do that for a rezoning.
To Charlie's point, he's talking about the width of the roads, and you say that we're primarily DOT. Can the county amend the UDO to go above and beyond and mandate a minimum width for a public road?
That's a slippery.
We've asked numerous times on some of these things that have come in.
It's a.
Roads are wide enough.
It's a slippery slope. It's something that we would have to have conversations with the DOT about, because ultimately, we want them to take on ownership and maintenance responsibility for that road.
Yeah, so it's wider, it's more material,
Right,
more
so if they're
cost.
not willing to accept some wider level of design,
If they would accept that, then you go back to, you have to hit 1, 2, and 3. If 1 is the road has to be 5 feet wider, then you could deny based on, hey, you didn't meet 1.
you could, again, that would require some conversation. We actually do have a slightly higher standard in the ordinance right now. It doesn't have to do with width, it's got to do with pavement depth. Basically, we wanted to specify a deeper level, and Bjorn can probably explain this better than I can, but we wanted to specify a little bit hardier.
Thicker subgrade for
yeah,
longevity.
Right.
So it benefits the DOT, actually.
Yes, and DOT was, we had those conversations, that was actually when the UDO was put in place back in 2014. And we talked to DOT about it, and they said, yeah, by all means, we're completely fine with that. I will say it, I hesitate to. There is some legislation that's in place right now that says cities and counties, if there is a minimum state standard for some kind of regulation, you can't go above and beyond that standard. Now, it's debatable as to whether or not that applies to streets, because I think it was introduced in an environmental bill, but it is, the way it's written is kind of open-ended. But that'll take a legal challenge at some point, and that'll get
That's
figured out in the
lawyers.
court system, right? We're going to keep enforcing our ordinance the way it is. But, I mean, that would be, just to answer your question again, that would be just a longer conversation with DOT. Anyway, that was a good question, long answer.
Well, it's a bothersome thing to me.
Sure. As far as the text amendment that's being presented, we would ask that you provide a recommendation. This will be going to the county commissioners. This is one that the commissioners wanted to kind of move a little bit quickly. This will actually be going for a public hearing. I think it's
The
on the 15th.
The 15th?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Do we have any discussion on Amendment 5.030 and 105.030? If not, do we have a motion?
Oh, since this is a text amendment, we didn't actually put up a sign-up sheet for it, but it's kind of like a rezoning because it is an amendment. It follows that public hearing process. I didn't know if you wanted to take public comments on it. That's up to you.
Do we have any public comments on it? Yes, sir.
Good evening, planning board members, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Como from Wesley Chapel. I live at 1104 Highbrook Drive. I stayed around specifically for this item because I think it's moving in the right direction. It is bringing you to consistency with what the municipalities are doing, and we've had several issues in the past before we made the change where people were trying to do things on their property because that was their property, only to find out later that it was restricted. So this does resolve that issue to some degree. Typically, if I buy a house or a property, and I say, okay, I want to fence in my property, or I want to put a shed in my backyard, if it turns out to be floodplain or something else like that, I don't want to find out after the fact. So this really does resolve a lot of those issues, and I appreciate the fact that you're talking about it and that the county commissioners are making it a priority. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Okay. How about comments from the board?
Only comment I can say is this could not happen quick enough. And you have a lot of developers and land speculators that are looking for the low-hanging fruit, which is the land around the sewer line expansions. As you know, majority of the sewer lines run along creeks, and you have a lot of floodplains. So you're going to see a bunch of developers that are going to come in, and they're going to look at these parcels where you've got 40, 50 acres, and 20 of those are floodplains. We recently had a mixed-use project there on Cuthbertson, not too far back. The density, the overall density, when you deduct the floodplain, would have almost doubled. So there's some significant burying there. They would have probably had to go to a higher density. I can't recall if it was R6, but they may have had to go to R4 for that same density. So this would exclude, especially in a cluster zoning, the land that is roads, the land that is floodplain, and any kind of a buffer, a stream buffer, from the area that's even considered. I think that's huge.
Okay.
And I think that'll keep a bunch of frivolous rezonings from coming in front of this board.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Not hearing any more comments, do we have a motion to approve or disapprove? Move to approve.
And I'll say.
Thank you so much. So we have a second. Thank you, Everett. Appreciate it. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. Next, Lee. Text Amendment 160D.
I want to try to move through this as quickly as I can. This is a fairly large amendment, but I think I can break it down pretty quickly. A little bit of background on why you're seeing this amendment. The legislature adopted a major overhaul to North Carolina planning statutes. Actually, I think last year, a couple years ago, and part of those provisions sets a couple deadlines. One is you have to amend, all counties and cities in North Carolina are having to go through this. You have to amend your existing zoning and development ordinances to bring them into compliance with these laws this says January 1st, 2021. Obviously, you're past that date. That was amended. It is July 1st, 2021, so I apologize. I didn't catch that when I was copying and pasting this from the NCAPA's guidance. The other is to update or adopt a comprehensive plan by July 1st, 2022 in order to maintain existing zoning and development regulations. I know that we are on the cusp of bringing the 2050, and in fact, that's your next item after this, to bring the 2050 plan. But this one, B, doesn't necessarily apply to Union County because our current plan is from 2014, so it is new enough to meet this standard. But we do have to update our current ordinance by July 1 of 2021 to stay in compliance with state law. Now, what does that really do? The major changes are, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull up this is probably the best way to actually do this. The vast majority of these changes are references. So the old reference was 153A. That was the county planning and zoning provision. Cities had zoning authority and planning authority before counties did, so that's why it was different. Counties got it later, so it was 153A was the statute section. Now they've all been consolidated, so cities and counties are together. It's all under 160D. And so 153A, Article 18, that's all gone. So this is the new reference. That's the vast majority of what you see throughout this document is just updating old references to the new 160D reference. There are a couple of new provisions that were put in this. This bill, much like any other bill that goes to Raleigh, required a little bit of negotiation. So you had the General Assembly kind of in the middle. You had the School of Government and the NCAPA really wanting to modernize the planning legislation in North Carolina. And then you had the home building lobby on the other side that wanted some things and said, well, we'll support this if you add a couple things in here, which everybody ultimately agreed to do. What this provision says is really, if you have a piece of property, and I'll kind of break this down a little bit for simplicity's sake, if you've got a piece of property that's kind of split jurisdiction, which we don't have many of in the county, but we've got a few, you can, whoever is that jurisdictional split, they can agree that one side or the other will take on the zoning responsibility for that property. The reason for that is just ease of using an ordinance. So somebody that wants to develop that property is not having to work with two separate jurisdictions. So they can do that through an interlocal agreement. Let's say Weddington and Wesley Chapel split a piece of property. They can go into an interlocal agreement and say, okay, Weddington says, okay, Wesley Chapel, we think you should take on zoning responsibility for this. And they can do that with an interlocal. No annexation, no de-annexation, just an agreement. So that's what that provision does. Again, references. We had some terminology changes. So you had a determination, but really what they did was a Board of Adjustment decision is now called a quasi-judicial decision. A Board of Commissioners decision is a legislative decision, and a staff decision is an administrative decision. So those are the three distinctions that they came up with. The old rules had a multitude of different terminologies that were used. They simplified it, came up with three. So in this case, this is referring to a Board of Adjustment, so it's quasi-judicial. Development approvals. This is basically saying that if a development approval is required, you have to get it. So you can't commence any type of development or proceed with any development until you get your development approval. And it goes on to say it can be in print or electronic form. If it's exclusive electronic form, it can't be edited. So it has, like a PDF document or something like that. An application, maybe at the owner, so it specifies who can make that application. So it's owner, lessee, somebody who's got an option, authorized agent, an easement holder that has it if they're making an application for something in that easement. And it says, unless otherwise provided, that all development approvals run with the land and not the owner. I know that's a question that comes up sometimes. So all these development approvals, unless there's some other law that says otherwise, they run with the land. Permit choice, this is one of those that I was telling you about that the development industry wanted in this bill, and it was included. There's a lot of stuff in here. Basically, this says that if a development application comes in and during the time that development application is being decided, there's an amendment to the code. The developer then has the choice to either continue on under the current ordinance or comply with the new rule. So it's basically saying you can't keep changing the ordinance to stop a development. That a developer, once the application's in, they have the choice to continue on with the ordinance that's in place when that development application was filed. That's kind of what this little section says. Again, terminology, a vesting plan, that's how long things are vested for. There's a minimum automatic 2 years. They can ask for 5. Again, reference sections, evidentiary hearing. Again, that refers back to a Board of Adjustment. That's the type of hearing, not the decision. Again, evidentiary, a determination. So they changed some terminology from decision to determination. Really kind of got away from dates in looking at manufactured homes. That was something that the county always did, July 1st, 1976. By eliminating this, it doesn't change our rules because we still say it has to meet or exceed the construction standards of HUD. So that's the sticker that's inside a mobile home that says what the HUD code, it's built to that code. That date, that July 1st, 1976 date, is a date they started putting those stickers in those mobile homes. So we still say that it has to meet HUD standards, so it still has to have that sticker. So that change doesn't impact our ordinance. It still has to meet the same standard. Again, evidentiary hearing.
I want to get back to this permit choice.
Sure. Yes, sir.
And I believe you mentioned 2 years, but permit choice is valid for 18 months.
Yes.
Is what it says there.
Yeah, so that's not the permit approval. So if I come in and I get a rezoning approved, or if I get a special use permit or a subdivision approved, the date that approval's given, then I've got minimum statutory required 2 years to start doing something.
Okay.
Or I can ask for up to 5. What this is saying is, if I'm a developer and I file an application for a subdivision, the day that, the day that application's filed, then I can choose to continue that subdivision under the rules that were in place the date that I filed that application. Any subsequent ordinance change after that date, I can choose for that change to apply to my subdivision, or I can say I don't want it to apply to my subdivision. That 18 months is, you have that permit choice, that developer has the permit, has the choice of that option for 18 months after he files that application. So,
But he has 2 years.
once it's approved.
Once it's approved.
Yeah.
N-
So
and-
this 18 months is running, really, it starts running before that approval date.
All right, what we heard tonight, we said 2 years, but he could extend it out 5 years.
He has to specifically ask for that in his application.
But then it would end at 5 years.
Yes, it would end at 5 years. There are some provisions in this that have extended phased developments. You'll see that in a minute. A phased development, which is typically a large-scale project, to 7 years. So that's something that the legislature added as part of this bill as well. Like I said, you'll see that in a minute. But it extended it to 7. The thing about those approvals, though, is even if you get it approved, if it's a rezoning approval, and the Board of Commissioners says, we approve this rezoning, and we're going to give you a 5-year vesting right. If that developer doesn't do anything in that 5 years, the rezoning doesn't go away. That rezoning's still there
Man.
because a rezoning requires legislative action by the Board of County Commissioners. So they would have to, so if they zone something that R4 conditional, and it sits there for 5 years, developer doesn't do anything, it doesn't automatically revert, because there has to be a legislative action to take it back to R40. But the board could do that. The board could absolutely say, this has been sitting out there for 5 years, Mr. Developer, you haven't done anything with it, your vested rights have gone away, we are taking action to, and you have to come to the planning board first, has to follow that same process, because you are rezoning a property at that point. So it would come to the planning board for recommendation, it would go back to the Board of County Commissioners, and they would do what they wanted to with it, and approve it or deny it. Yes.
Question real quick on 1.150B. The 18 months, there's a lot of talk of sewer. That's going to be the hot button topic now for a few years. There may be some additional requirements that come on account of some of the new plants that have to go online. I guess my concern here is if you're talking 18 months out, someone's already put an application in, and things get deferred, but they come back and say, oh, well, now we've got these system development fees, or something's different. Of course, the developer's not going to say, well, no, I want to pay more. So to me, that looks like a potential pitfall with the 18 months on that statute.
Sure, I understand that. And this is one of those, like I said, that the building industry wanted in this bill. So there were actually two separate bills. There was the 160D and there was for lack of a better word, the developer's bill, and they ended up consolidating those two bills together. And that's how this got pushed through the legislature.
If this gets adopted, what kind of time frame are they looking at? Could we essentially vote to defer this?
We are, so this is one of those that it's a text amendment, so it has to go through the process, but it is mandatory. This is a state
So-
statute, this is, yeah.
So can we change anything on it, or, so why are we talking about it?
Because it's a text amendment, and it has to, I know, it's crazy, because it is a text amendment, so in order to approve a text amendment, it has to have a recommendation by the planning board, and it has to be adopted by the county commissioners.
So if we
Now,
disapprove, that does nothing.
if it's, let's say that the Board of County Commissioners turns this down. If they turn it down, it's iffy as far as legal goes. We have been told by the School of Government that it may very well invalidate your entire ordinance because you don't reference the right sections.
But you couldn't pass something saying, basically, we change all the references and that's the only thing we're adopting. And then you circumvent that concern.
You possibly could, but since this is in the North Carolina general statutes, we have to go by it anyway.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
What was the point?
Yeah, we're not, we can't change. Now, honestly, we could probably set a smaller time frame if we wanted to say, or I'm sorry, in the permit choice is valid for 18 months. We couldn't set something smaller than that. If we wanted to say 24, we could probably make that time period longer. But I don't think we could shorten that time period.
I say
love
motion.
democracy.
Motion to reluctantly approve.
Put Jonathan's name in it, and we'll blame him, okay?
Well, I know, and I get where you're coming from, because it's a, we're creatures of the state. We have to do what they say. We're not, we're Dillon's rule state. We're not home rule, so we can't
Yeah,
make up
well,
our
in the
own.
interest of time, I don't know what the point of covering it is if we don't have much say in the matter anyways. Arguing with my mom over to eat my vegetables or not, you're gonna eat them.
Carrying on.
Carry on. If we can't change them,
That's right.
carry them on.
All right.
Just inform us.
So I think you got a motion to reluctantly approve.
So you're through and ready for us to follow?
I'll stop, if we got a motion, yeah, we got a couple more items, so.
Chairman, what about public comment?
Any public comments? Okay, restate your motion.
Motion to reluctantly approve with objections noted.
Motion's been made. Do we have a second? Second by Patrick. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, like sign. Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Oh, Lord.
Were you really gonna go through all this?
I was. But I appreciate the interjection, so.
Okay. Bjorn?
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We're going to give a presentation on the Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan that has been approved by the Coordinating Committee, citizens-led process that was tasked by the County Commission to update the plan. We have a slideshow, but I want to have Archie Morgan, the chairman of the committee, who has graciously taken time out of his schedule to come and present his perspective on the process and what's presented, and then I'll get into a few of the details and how, and the assignment for you guys now through April to hopefully make some sort of determination to the county commission.
But that's not going to be done tonight.
Tonight is information and starting the comment or the review for you guys to answer questions and prepare you so that in April you're fully informed and can make a decision.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
State your name and address, please.
I'm Archie Morgan. I live at 505 South Church Street in downtown Monroe.
Good.
And I own WIXE Radio here in Monroe.
Appreciate all your work on this.
Thank you very much. I have a newfound respect for you gentlemen. This is a lot. This is heavy stuff. But anyway, this is was a citizen-led 5 subcommittees and then a coordinating committee, and we've worked on this for the past 14 months, and we've heard many presentations from all different things that you folks work with on a regular basis. Everything from water and sewer to wells to traffic to law enforcement and a lot of things in between. So we think we've come up with a good plan, and we ask that you give it some serious consideration. You can see our vision statement. We're a place defined by our connections and local governments working together on targeted issues. We realize we have, a lot of municipalities, and they do their own thing, and it's been interesting trying to work this out, knowing that they control so much of what's going on. But we're proposing to implement what is called the advancement scenario, and this is the one that was picked, and all the municipalities liked it as well. And we selected that back in September over retaining the status quo or only making changes to development regulations. We have a revised land use map. The new map reflects more focused, higher density areas, provisions for preserving a rural character in Union County, which was important to a lot of people, and identified commercial and employment nodes. In addition to the traditional land use categories, the map, which you'll see, identifies pockets of county-regulated land for annexation if the owners wish to rezone and develop their property for higher density uses. Also has some upgraded regulations for new development. It would include higher stormwater standards, increased open space in rural areas, flexibility to cluster lots in rural areas with utilities and conditions for new school sites, and some new programs are in the plan. The plan recognizes the county has to invest in new programs to address community issues, increasing transportation investments from $100,000 to up to $5 million through the quarter-cent sales tax that we're proposing in this plan, mandatory well inspections of new homes to inform potential home buyers with the status of the safety of drinking water. We received some presentations about well water, and I'll just tell you as a caveat, they put up a picture of Union County. It was all in white. And then they put one up and had a red dot where all the bad wells were. There was no white left on the map. I mean, it was really eye-opening, the amount of things that are in some of this well water, and some people are oblivious to it. Our proposal would make mandatory well inspections of new homes. Continued initiatives to address unsafe drinking water, including the short line water extensions that the commissioners have already agreed to do at $5 million a year. Establish a task force to identify strategies to address litter. Don't know how much you gentlemen are on social media, but it's been a lot of talk here as of late. There's a lot of litter in this county. I just can't believe the thoughts of rolling your window down and throwing a cup out. I mean, those days, there was a time you did that. McDonald's didn't even have a trash can in the parking lot. You were supposed to throw it out. But people are just throwing out trash. It's just all over the place. A small group picked up 50 pounds in less than an hour of trash. So we think that's important. We want our county to look good. Also committing resources to expanding broadband internet. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that we have some problems with broadband internet in the county, including the city of Monroe. They don't have broadband everywhere as well. The strategies that made it into the draft plan, you can see the current land use plan versus the new land use plan, and you can see we didn't keep everything in. If it was close, we erred on the side of the numbers. The increased stormwater requirements, the well testing on the new homes, you can see the different committees, the citizens, the environmental subcommittee, business and development, infrastructure, agriculture, and then ultimately the coordinating committee. So the numbers had to be high for these things to be in the plan, which they are. The school siding requirements and the well rehabilitation grant program and those sort of things. So it had to score well with all the committees to make it into this plan. The additional strategies, it was based on feedback. We asked for a feedback from the public, and we got it.
Archie, can I interrupt and ask a question?
You may, sir, yes.
We were talking earlier before we started this last portion of the meeting. I find it interesting that you say continued initiatives to address unsafe drinking water, including short line water extensions, rural water authority. Then we're going to do mandatory inspections for new homes.
Yes.
And I look over at your chart over here. It says well testing on existing homes, citizens 0%. Do we not
Yes.
care about the citizens?
Sir?
Do we not care about the citizens?
No, absolutely we do. That's the citizens subcommittee. When it says citizens, that's the citizens.
Themselves.
Do you agree with that, Patrick?
No, that's the citizens themselves. They're saying that.
No.
But that's not what you said that y'all did on that walk around of the neighborhood, right?
No,
Did I misunderstand you?
I'll be glad to explain. You know, we had all these different subcommittees. The citizens subcommittee, I was the chairman of. The reason that there's a 0 there, and we were gonna go back and change it, you remember the sticking point with that?
It was about the additional regulatory intrusion in the real estate transaction process.
We had some pushback from developers and so forth, but I can tell you, if we were to vote again, we would be at 100%. It's the way that the citizen subcommittee saw one of the questions, and they didn't like the way it was worded, so that's why they voted the way they did.
That's the existing homes, though, not new homes.
Yes. That's right. We thought we'd get significant pushback if we tried to get all existing homes tested rather than just new homes.
I think the issue there was, number one, that would require some special legislation in Raleigh.
Yeah.
And I think that the Citizens Committee saw that as a pretty heavy lift.
We didn't see that happening.
Yeah, and thought there might be some pushback from the real estate industry because it's adding something into the private sales transaction between two people. I think that was the.
Well, beyond that.
Issue. Sorry?
Beyond that, so imagine you have a house with well, I don't know if any of you guys do, I do, but say you've lived there for 30 years and you're ready to move out, or you need to go to a retirement home or whatever the case may be, you go to sell, next thing you know, there's a mandated well inspection, and guess what, you've got arsenic, your home value is nothing. And short line extension is a great thing, but it's not coming fast enough, and there's just not enough dollars to do it. So that's a challenge. I guess the other point to that is if I'm buying a home and they've got a well, I can request it at my expense. I can get it done, and I can make the decision to buy or not buy based on that as a private citizen, not relying on the government to
During the due
protect me.
diligence process.
Correct. And if I request that while I'm buying a house and they tell me I can't, then I'm just gonna say, well, I'm gonna walk away from that one.
Yeah.
You wanna allow an inspection? Okay. So, just my 2
Sir,
cents.
you had a question.
Regarding that well water, unless I'm mistaken, my understanding is as we have more development and punching more holes in the ground and drawing more water here and there, a well that was a good well, a perfectly good well, because of the development around it and stuff, could become contaminated.
Exactly.
What I say is a public health thing. I mean, wouldn't you think it would require all well testing somewhat periodically? Like John's talking about, if my well showed arsenic, couldn't sell my house, but if he had got kidneys raising over there, if he didn't want to sell a house and didn't know he had arsenic in the thing, he's killing his family. I mean, gee.
Right. No, I mean,
was there any consideration done for we are affecting the other wells when you put 12 wells over here, this guy's sitting there, his well may be changed.
We think that everyone in Union County that has well water should have it tested.
Doesn't the county offer free testing for new wells?
For new wells,
There's no organized
it's not
testing system,
free,
though, is that
you have to
correct?
get a permit, but there is a test for new wells as part of that.
Yeah, when I got mine done, they said, hey, you're eligible, so with drilling the well, getting the permit and everything, you're eligible for getting your well tested, and we'll do that for you. The county did.
Yes,
So-
that is part of a new well. If you drill a new well in Union County for consumption, you have to have it tested. And that's a requirement.
But it has to be for drinking water.
Yes,
You can drill a well just for irrigation.
right. And again, that's for a new well. Existing, there's no requirement to take.
Were there any other questions about that?
Thank you.
Okay. thank you.
Appreciate it.
So some additional strategies to expand the transition zones even more, to take in nearly all the land between municipalities in western Union County. The coordinating committee supported some expansion of the transition zones and lowered the density away from these primary roads, but not necessarily all land use decisions in the unincorporated parts of western Union County. The coordinating committee's final position was to reaffirm the initial response and with the revised land use map that we have. Enact a policy to deny rezonings that add traffic until funded road projects are completed. Now, the coordinating committee strongly supported this proposal and would like the municipalities to enact similar policies. To us, and we're just citizens, okay, we don't do this every day, but we all know, and we drive the roads in Union County. If you go down one, let's just pick one, Ridge Road or Dees Road, whatever Balcom Dees becomes. There's subdivisions going in out there as there is all over the county. Same two-lane road that's always been there. And we're gonna dump all these hundreds of, we're gonna build hundreds of homes, 2, 3-car families. And, we just thought it was just a no-brainer. Let's not keep putting in subdivisions until the roads can handle it. It just made sense to us. And the coordinating committee supports designing rezonings that add peak hour traffic such as residential. With all the municipalities, we're asking them to adopt this as well, not just, Union County. Eliminate all multifamily land uses from the land use map in western Union County. The coordinating committee felt the new land use map already significantly reduces the amount of land for these land uses, and they're limited to key intersections along current and future multi-lane roads. Such development would not be supported until the road widenings are complete. We just think we need that road infrastructure before we go adding to it. Also using proposed quarter-cent sales tax to help pay for public transportation projects, such as the proposed light rail route from Mecklenburg County into Stallings and Indian Trail. So the rub there is just the cost. The coordinating committee did not support this proposal. They felt the light rail project did not have, they didn't provide any details on a budget or schedule, and the sales tax revenue would not even begin to touch it. How much was it a mile? $100 million a mile to run light rail? County commissioner's never going to sign off on it. The money's not there for it. So we didn't support that. We did engage the public. We had monthly committee meetings where people could come and sign up to speak. Public notices for all the subcommittee and coordinating committee meetings was sent out. Everybody knew when our meetings were. The comment periods and all the meeting agendas. The periods on all 3 phases of the plan. We had interactive online maps, Facebook posts. It was on the county website, the employee newsletter with the county, emails to all the municipalities and committee members. And we did a lot of in-person stuff, municipal presentation. We had presentations at the different municipalities. We presented to HOAs and community groups as well. And we had drop-in comment period meetings. We wanted to embrace the public, and they came out and supported it. We asked the extended plan comment period and the feedback results. They asked for more time to comment. We gave it to them. And you can see there, we got a lot of support. on the plan. We asked what township you live in. You know, we wanted to really get the numbers crunched, and Bjorn can get more specific with you on that. How long have you lived in Union County? And then we come to the recommended Union County 2050 land use map, which you can see, and Bjorn can go in more detail if you have questions about that. Our timeline and the steps for completion, you, the planning board, will receive the plan tonight. The planning board, you will make a recommendation to the county commission. I've got some dates here. I don't know if they're tentative, but April 5th. May 3rd, tentative, the county commission receives the plan and your recommendation, and they will call for a public hearing on the plan. That would be in May. Got to have time to print it and broadcast it and all that, and so the county commission would hold a public hearing on the plan early June. And then towards the end of June, the county commission will take action to either approve, deny, or accept the plan. So that's where we're at with it. Just a couple little tidbits of things. You know, we put in here that we support a water authority. And I just want to say that that's a sticking point with some of the commissioners, because they feel like, and the main rub with them is they feel they're going to lose control. Well, one of our committee members on the coordinating committee, Dwayne Wingo, is in charge of water in Stanley County. He has done the water authority thing. I forget the final numbers, but 30% of it was in the form of a grant, and the rest was financed at 1.25%. That's pretty cheap money. And he says he didn't have to give up any control. So I don't know what the commissioners, they say we don't want to give up control of the water. He said he gave up nothing in Stanley County. The thing about the water authority, it opens up the door up for grant money. And without one, I mean, it's non-existent. The committees just felt like if there's grant money available, we need to pursue it. And anytime you can get some money to help pay for a huge water projects, the better. So Bjorn can answer any specific details if you have more questions about it. But like I said, this was we put this together over 14 months. We had a lot of great people from all walks of life that donated their time, and like I said, heard a lot of presentations and had to learn a lot of things that went into this plan. It's been eye-opening, and we all enjoyed it. I think I speak for all the committee members.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for your dedication and hard work to bring all this up to where the staff could work on it, and with y'all's leadership, and bring it to us.
Thank you very much.
Great
Appreciate
job.
it.
Bjorn?
Sure. So just to recap in terms of what you guys are being asked for, Archie did a great job of presenting it. This is the website, Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan. Easiest thing to do is just Google Union County 2050 and this will come up. You click on the link to the plan. It's the document that was hyperlinked in your agenda packet. It's approximately 90 pages, actually 87. Go to the table of contents. You can hyperlink down to the specific sections. A lot of graphics, so it's not 90 pages, 87 pages of text. Do encourage you to read it. You guys, I hopefully will be in a position in a month from now to make a recommendation. You could recommend it as presented. You could say this is terrible and we don't recommend it at all, or you could say we recommend it with the following changes, either adding some stuff or deleting some stuff. Maybe there were things that were considered in the plan but not selected that you thought was an oversight and should be selected. You could make that recommendation. At that point, we would have two documents going to the county commission. There would be what the citizens recommended, and there would be what the planning board recommended, and that's perfectly fine. But you can see how this plan and its recommendations, if implemented, would have impacted our decision or our recommendations and our advice to you on the rezoning tonight. We would have been affected by the fact that 16 is a funded project, but it's not yet implemented. We would therefore recommend denial until that road was built, because it was directly accessing 16. That's a very clear impact of this plan and its recommendations. That policy wouldn't apply to all congested roads. It would only apply to roads that are funded for improvements that have not yet been built. Could be a roundabout project at an intersection, or it could be Monroe Road or other multi-lane road widenings that have yet to occur. That's how that would be implemented. So otherwise, like Archie said, we thought it was a good process. We thought we ended on a good note. It generally worked exactly as we had projected it. Several of you participated either directly or through close contacts, and we thank all of you for your engagement as well. But a lot of people who weren't necessarily members of boards also participated, so it was a good cross-section. And otherwise, now through the beginning of April, feel free to call us with any questions. Otherwise, we would hope that you would put this on your agenda for action in April.
Okay. Does everybody agree with April? Good. Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Bjorn. Appreciate you staying this late. Mr. Lee.
I have one more item, and it will be very quick. This is the proposed 2021 schedule for Planning Board. It was our intent to have this on the January 5th meeting, and I failed to get this in the agenda packet. But these are the dates that the Planning Board will meet. You see there's a couple of changes. July will be the 13th. The BOCC is meeting on the 6th, so that pushes our meeting down a week. And then September 14th, the commission's meeting on the 7th, and September 6th is Labor Day, so that's going to push our meeting down a week. All the other times are the regular, normal Planning Board meeting times. So we would actually like the board to officially adopt this meeting schedule. That way we can go ahead and put it out on the website as this is the official meeting schedule for 2021.
Lee's asked for a motion to accept this agenda. Do we have a? Patrick, seconded by Jonathan.
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's adopted. Thank you. Staff, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks, everybody. Amy, thank you for staying here.
Motion to adjourn?
I will say this. I was quite surprised to not have 3 sheets of people that wanted to speak tonight.
Well, so was I.
I mean, after all that I heard that was on the Zoom, that lady said that she couldn't get a word in edgewise. I bet you she couldn't, I don't know why that was there. Maybe she did something wrong, I don't know.
Easy, cowboy.
We need a motion to adjourn. I already have one. Motion's been made. Do we have a second? Second, Patrick. All those in favor, raise your right hand. We are now officially adjourned. Drive careful, everybody. Let the rain begin.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah.
Let the rain start.
Hey, do you know what I've got at my house?